Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of the council meeting. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and a video recording will be posted online shortly after the meeting on the council's YouTube channel. So I'll just remind members we need to behave in a respectful manner to each other and to officers. I appreciate emotions can be high with some of the items. We can disagree, and no doubt will disagree, but we can do it without questioning the good faith of our officers or other members. Not only does the code of conduct require this of us, but the public expects it of us too. I take this opportunity to remind members all members should be heard without interruption. If members who are attending remotely wish to speak, they should use the raise hand icon on screen. I will ask if all who wish to speak have done so before closing the debate. But at that point, it's your responsibility to ensure you attract my attention, even by cutting in verbally. Otherwise, you may miss your chance to speak. And members joining remotely should ensure their cameras are turned on at all times. And before we start, all members should check now that your mobile phones are switched off or on silent. Mr. Moody, go to Mr. Moody for the said on.
Thank you, Provost. Provost Bissett.
Present.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Present.
Councillor Aitchison.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Anslow.
Present.
Councillor Binney.
Yeah.
Present.
Councillor Bowes.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Present.
Bailey Buchanan.
Present.
Councillor Bundy.
Present.
Councillor Colley.
Present.
Councillor Deacon. Present. Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Flynn.
Present.
Councillor Forrest.
Right.
Councillor Garner.
Present.
Yeah.
Councillor Hannah.
Still said that I'm
Present.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Bailey Kerr.
Here.
Councillor McCabe.
Present.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Present.
Apologies have been submitted by Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nimmo.
Present.
Councillor Patterson. Councillor Patrick.
She's having Wi-Fi problems at the moment. Try to join.
Councillor Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Ritchie.
Present.
We have apologies from Councillor Robertson, Councillor Sinclair,
Yeah.
Councillor Spears,
Present.
Councillor Steinbeck.
Present.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Moody. So the business will be review of swimming pools. We've already heard the deputation last night from Mr. McCavish. And then we'll go into SPR, then we'll go into review of polling places and districts. So the first item of business agenda item 9, review of swimming pools, and we'll go to Mr. Benny to speak to that.
Thank you, Provost. In April 2023, Council asked officers to review the secondary school swimming pools and come back with proposals for increasing usage and income and reducing costs and carbon. I led a multidisciplinary team involving officers from sport and leisure, education, property and finance to look at this in detail. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone involved for their contributions, with particular credit going to Cameron Reid and Russell McAloney from the sport and leisure team. The report outlines a proposal to transform the way the school pools are operated by Falkirk Council to deliver £400,000 of additional income and make the pools cheaper to operate. This would involve an expansion of the Learn to Swim scheme and higher fees for commercial businesses who hire our pools. It also looks to raise charges for local aquatic clubs to the national average rather than the very low prices that they've been paying to date. There are further recommendations to streamline operations by adopting a new standardised pricing structure for all school pools and more simple booking processes. And finally, a new project will be taken forward to increase access to school pools at the end of the school day. Currently, community access begins around 6 p.m, but most school activities finish around 4:45 p.m. so there's an opportunity to increase the available pool hours for the public. The review recognises the critical role swimming plays in the physical, emotional and mental health of the Falkirk community, and so recommends that the price of public swimming is protected. A modest 30p increase is proposed next year. Go Card holders, the council's concessionary membership scheme, continues to receive free swimming in all public swimming sessions. I really hope that this proposal is welcomed by elected members. Officers have listened to councillors and put forward a proposal that seeks to address the aspirations agreed in April 2023. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Mr. Benny. We'll now go to Councillor Meikle-John to speak to the motion.
Handing over to my portfolio holder, Councillor Garner.
Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Provost. I'd also like to thank officers, especially Cameron, Russell and Carol, for the work that has gone into this. It must be one of the largest exercises this council has undertaken. It's great to see a proposal come forward that looks to provide a sustainable future for our school swimming pools, something we hoped we could achieve. As I've said before, the message coming from our communities was heard loud and clear. A reduction in pools across our school estate was a red line, and we needed to explore an alternative that would allow us to keep them all open. This proposal outlines a way to expand the Learn to Swim scheme, introduce a new standardised pricing structure and open up access to pools for our community earlier than is currently the case. I'm sure we can all support those points. More difficult is the introduction of the increased fees, but we are committed to continue engagement and working with swimming clubs to find solutions to the challenges this may pose. I have personally met and listened to concerns from swimming clubs and taken cognizance of their knowledge, and that is evident in our amendment, which I'll come to shortly. And only yesterday spoke with Ewan Lowe, or the day before yesterday, sorry, Chief Executive of Scottish Swimming, who was generally supportive of our amendment. This administration did not want to close any swimming pools, but we were prepared to take that unpalatable decision in order to fix this council's finances. The debate led to this work, and given the alternative, I hope that all elected members will support the report and its recommendations. Provost, I have an amendment. The amendment reads, Council agrees to the recommendations in the report and adds the following. Council acknowledges that the uplift in charges proposed in the report will have an impact on aquatic clubs. Therefore, to give them time to adjust, it is proposed that the increase in charges for pool hire will be phased over 2 financial years, with charges increasing to aquatic clubs to £40 per 45 minutes 24-25, rising to £67 per 45 minutes from 25-26. Council acknowledges that this approach will result in a one-year non-recurring budget shortfall of £17,710 and asks the service to consider as part of the wider budget process how this could be met. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Garner. Do you have a seconder for your amendment?
Provost, yeah, happy to second and reserve the right to come in.
Thanks. It's been circulated just now. The members want time a recess to go over the amendment.
Provost, I suspect there's another amendment.
Yes, I'm just going to. Councillor Hannah, do you have an amendment coming?
We do have an amendment, yes.
Thank you.
And we don't need time at the moment because this amendment was circulated, as was ours.
Okay, Councillor Kerr, do you have Bailey Kerr? Done it again. Do you have an amendment?
No amendment.
Councillor Spears, do you have an amendment coming forward?
We don't have an amendment, but we have some comments to make.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks very much. So, Councillor Steinbach, you speak to your amendment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Provost. And I'd also like to thank the officers for this report. On the whole, it's an incredibly welcome and effective report. I think it gets us to a place in which we can see that a substantial increase of income has identified areas for income generation. And I think it sends out a strong message that there's a way to keep the school pools open in the long term, rather than leaving them as vacant within the school estate. I think it vindicates the decision that the Council took back in May to vote for the Falkirk Labour Amendment, believing that we can substantially increase the income from the pools by expanding and remodelling the way they are used to best serve our communities. Increasing income and increasing usage, this is the way to save the pools. That is the consistent opinion that we've held at Falkirk Labour and one we have towards this report as well. I won't go over everything, but concerns have been raised, as all elected members know, by the aquatics clubs communities, that the rise suggested in this report of around 5 times more is not compatible with their development plans and would potentially jeopardise their short-term future. That is why we suggest a significant, but I think reasonable move towards £25 for this upcoming financial year, and a move towards £35 the year afterwards, and then the year afterwards moving towards the national benchmarking framework. I think, as we've heard, concerns have been raised on the benchmarking data by the swimming clubs, and in a letter by Ewan Lowe showing that the national figure does not take into account several of the factors. This incremental approach should allow us to clarify in the future the data that we use to inform our pricing structures. This approach is still progressing and setting a clear direction towards financial sustainability of the pools, and without threatening the viability of certain activities within the pools. An additional ask in our amendment above the pricing for the report is to report back to the executive by empowering officers to explore alternative pricing structures for aquatics clubs and feedback in the report in 2025. I think so that we can further explore the prospect of maximising the efficiency of our pool space and the extensive timetabling that will come alongside this and report back in 2025. I think the submission yesterday from Phil McCavish, teased out from questions from myself, Councillor Garner and Councillor Flynn, illustrated that there is a complexity to how the clubs operate that isn't always reflected in every specific pricing structure. I think if we were deciding from scratch, and we agree with the pricing structure, but I think we need to listen to those who are currently operating. Again, I'll come back to increased income and increased usage. We cannot achieve one without making sure performance swimming pathways are accessible to those who choose to participate, and that there always remains a strong pathway for swimming prospects. Who knows, the next Duncan Scott or Kathleen Dawson may be training in a Falkirk district pool today. I move this amendment on behalf of Falkirk Labour.
Thanks very much, Councillor Steinbach. Do you have a seconder?
Yeah, Provost, I'm going to second, just echo what Councillor Steinbach said. It was good that Falkirk Labour got this amendment passed to have the go look again. We believe from the start that it was hard work, and it was one of the largest exercises undertaken by the council. But by doing this, we've been able to keep the pools for our school students and the swimming clubs. Myself and Councillor Steinbach met with a number of the swimming clubs. I think one of the just important things I'd want to highlight is the swimming clubs are 42% of the council's the pool usage time, but they're only 5% of the income, but they're using the pools a lot of times where normally we couldn't hire them out anyway. But one of the biggest reasons for us keeping the pool, one of the best campaigners for keeping the pools, was the swimming clubs. And I think we really need to support them to maintain and thrive in Falkirk. It's something we do really well. The increase proposed, like going from £12.50 for 45 minutes to 67, it's just a bit too steep for them now. We believe that after extensive consultation with them, that our amendment is the best way forward for them. It'll protect them if they're putting the prices up too much, and they're worried that, obviously, as you heard from Mr McCavish yesterday, if they have to put their prices up quite high, they'll lose a lot of members. So it's getting that balance right, and we believe this amendment does it. And speaking with Scottish Swimming, they're quite adamant that performance sport is a sort of pyramid model where the learn to swim and the lower, it all goes up and supports the kind of top performers of the sport. And they say that's how a lot of sports work. It's the kind of base supports, money feeds into the top and helps us deliver Commonwealth athletes and Olympic athletes. But I'll leave it there, and I'll just ask that you support the Labour amendment on this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Redmond. We'll now open up for debate. Councillor Spears, thank you. Firstly, we welcome this report. It shows how people and pupil power has been listened to.
Thank you.
I especially remember being called in by the school captains at Grangemouth High School with great concerns regarding this, and they took the time to go and protest in Falkirk. It's good to see that, as we've seen as we entered this building yesterday and today, that people are now starting to take
matters into their own hands concerning what's happening to amenities in their community. But I have two questions. The first question is the carbon dioxide will increase by 4,780 tonnes over the next 6 years. Is there any investigation ongoing to try and reduce this and also to reduce the cost of heating our pools? Will the pools remain at the same temperature, or is there any intention to cut the temperature in the pools? And my second question is the timings for public use. Has a programme been worked out so it doesn't clash with the school use? We'll be supporting the Labour amendment as it reduces costs for the users.
Thanks very much, Councillor Spears. We'll go to Mr. Benny to answer that. Then we'll, the SNP group want a recess to look at the 5 minutes. So if Mr. Benny could, or Mr. Jeffrey, answer these two questions, please.
I can certainly answer the one on the carbon, the CO2 emissions. We have an ongoing programme of installation of solar PVs, air source heat pumps, LED lighting across the learning estate, particularly in the secondary schools. And that will reduce our carbon emissions overall. There's no suggestion, certainly as I'm aware, that the paper in front of us will increase the carbon emissions from our learning estate. It's at that level because the pools are already in use. Things like the management of ensuring that pool covers will always reduce our energy consumption, thereby reducing our carbon emissions. So there's a lot of activity in that area to reduce our energy consumption in schools.
Sorry, so the temperatures of the pools will be remaining the same. We won't be cutting the temperature.
Temperatures will remain as they are in accordance with our guidance for temperature control within schools.
And as we increase the insulation value, did you say pool covers, that should reduce the running costs?
Pool covers are an effective way of reducing the running costs on heating and in terms of the water temperature. And it can reduce the energy consumption required to keep them at appropriate temperature.
So we will be monitoring that, and you'll come back to us with figures to say how much we've saved.
There will be an energy update report as we do as part of our asset management planning, which covers the whole estate, where we identify the activities we undertake and the impact they have overall. So that is part of our performance reporting anyway.
And the timings for public use, has this been worked out?
Sorry, just understanding the question a bit better. We've said that there's a project going to be underway to look at how we gain access to the pools earlier than is currently normal at 6 p.m. So we haven't got a finalised plan. Otherwise, I would have put it as an appendix into the report. But that will be a project that we work to, and I think we're confident that we can get extra access to the pools.
Well, opening them for public use means we need to open them for public use. So that's what we've been asked to vote for today. So it'll be interesting to see when the timings come back and if there is any clash between school use and public use.
Thanks very much, Councillor Spears. We'll now have a 5-minute recess. Speaker, do you want to see if there's any changes since the recess?
I'll pass over to Councillor Garner.
Councillor Garner.
No changes, Travis.
Okay, thank you. So we'll continue the debate. Anybody want to come in? Councillor Bush.
Thank you, Provost. We heard quite a lot last night, very late last night, about benchmarking, and I say it's mentioned here again. Can I have our officers' view on the benchmarking, because we've only heard from the chat last night?
So I'm happy to give an overview, and if you want more detail, I'll ask Cameron to come forward. But our view is that the benchmarking report that we have used in this report has been in place for 19 years, and it's an average. And whenever you have an average, there will be some clubs that maybe pay more than the average, and there'll be some clubs that maybe pay less. So that's the average, and that's our view that that is the best figure to go with. Having said that, as I said in the briefings, the report recommends a fast track, get you that 400 grand as quick as possible. And we're not ashamed about that. That was the task. If elected members want to see an element of phasing to support the clubs, then we're happy with that. I think what we would say is that the gearing of that phasing in the view of officers should be at a level that seeks some change in behaviour. And if the level's set too low, that might not lead to a behaviour change for the clubs, and clubs working together to share pool space. But that's our view.
Thank you. I appreciate that and appreciate a high level view. I wouldn't mind getting a bit more detail, the Cameron, on it, please, because we have got quite a lot of detail last night.
So, yeah, in terms of the report, Sport Scotland go out to all local authorities and all community sports trusts, and officers from those organisations provide the average price for it's about 70 different activities for sport across sport and leisure. That gives you the average price for the local authority, and then it gets put into the average price for the national average. Now, within that, there will be local arrangements that clubs specifically have. We can't take that into account because we have to look at the average high level figure. So that was what we did. I think that was touching on what Phil talked about yesterday. He gave a number of examples of specific clubs that they're aware that may have a slightly different payment structure. That's a local arrangement, much in the same way that our clubs have a local arrangement that they currently pay, X in the evening, but in the morning they actually get in for free. So that's just an example of how we would employ that locally as well.
Thank you, Cameron. That's cleared that up quite a bit. Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much, Councillor Bowser. Councillor Billy Kert, then again. Billy Kert.
Thanks, Provost. Can ask how many 25-metre pools do we have? Am I correct in saying we have 3?
Across the full estate, yeah, and obviously in light of yesterday's decision, yeah.
Have all the pools got pool covers?
Yes, so the pool covers are generally used, pretty much consistently. There will be some instances where it's potentially not put out, but the expectation from officers is that the pool covers are used consistently. So, as I say, it's the exception rather than the norm where the pool covers aren't in use.
Have we got a monitoring regime for that?
I believe it's part of the daily duties of the staff in the facilities. So that's something that it has been flagged over the last sort of year since the energy prices went up significantly. So there's been an expectation on the venue staff to be far more sort of diligent in checking that.
Okay. Probably leading on from Councillor Spears' question earlier on, would it be possible to lower the ceilings in some of these venues? Provost, in response to Bailey Kerr's question, the answer is logically yes, because any engineering solution is there, but the ceilings will consist of a lot of mechanical and electrical equipment, which would need to then be adjusted also. So it would be fairly expensive in some instances. You've also got the question of the environment in terms of humidity and things like that can be caused, and by having those ceilings that can be controlled, and that's how it's been designed to be controlled. So we would have to undertake some fairly substantial investigations to determine if we could do that. But there is always an engineering solution. It just comes as to how much that would cost. And clearly during the works, the pools would be closed during that period, so we'd need to reflect that also.
Good answer, but that's not an answer I was wanting. I was wanting to say, aye, it's easy, just do it. Right, okay, Paul, thanks. Councillor Flynn spoke yesterday on he's got a bit of experience regarding the elite swimming with his 2 girls swimming for years. Are we the only, or one of the only local authorities that charge by 45 minutes?
I couldn't give you an answer to that. I know it's been sort of accepted custom and practice in Falkirk for a number of years, but I would need to check that. I don't know if we would have that information readily available, but we could check it. But it's been standard practice in Falkirk for a number of years.
See, I'm older than you, and I can remember it being 45 minutes, and it was like, right, red band's out, and that's why the 45 minutes was put in place. But if we increased the aquatic clubs, they're paying for an hour, so their session would be an hour. That would save them 12% cost in the year. So, looking at Labour's amendment, they've asked for a report to come back. That would be something that we would be mindful that could be added to that report. Would that be something, would that be possible?
It's certainly something that we can look at. As I say, we speaking to officers yesterday, it's not something that's been requested by the clubs, and so we're certainly open to have that conversation in terms of scheduling of the pool use across all the user groups. That's something that those conversations take place on an ongoing basis, because clubs will have a slightly different schedule throughout the year in all sports, all activities. So that's a regular conversation that takes place. So yeah, we'll continue to do so, and we can specifically ask the question around that point of 45 minutes or an hour.
Well, seeing as they use it for an hour, so they get charged for the 45 minutes. They also get charged for the 15 minutes that they use for the hour. So if that hour was inclusive in the 25, 35 or 65 per session, they save 12% on their yearly outlay. So it's just try to help these aquatic clubs, and as a council, I think I'm sure everyone in the room's trying to do the same. So
I think you're really confused on that. The clubs, so they're charging 45-minute increments. If they were to use it for an hour, the price at that point would go up on a pro-rated basis. So they wouldn't get an hour for the price that they're currently paying for 45 minutes. So, for example, at the moment it's £12.50 for 45 minutes. If they were to use it for an hour, it would be sort of £16 at that point would be the hourly rate. So they're charged currently for the time that they're using rather than,
So if they're in for 3 hours, they get charged 3 hours.
Yeah.
So they get charged 45 minutes.
Yeah, they wouldn't get charged 3 45-minute blocks, so they would get charged for on a pro rata basis for how long they're actually in for. So across the pools, there are a number of different time bookings that they will book for. Not all sessions are 45 minutes. Some are in for 2 hours, some are in for 3 hours, depending on how many sort of squads they have going through. But the club gets charged for their total time.
Right, okay. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Billy Kerr, and thanks, Mr. Reid, for your contribution. Councillor Bundy, did you have your light on? Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Provost. 7.10 in the report states that there might be a risk that some clubs cannot afford the increase in the recommendations. If clubs couldn't afford the increases being proposed, is there a risk that the council may actually lose revenue?
Yeah, and that's one of the points that we sort of factored that in. So the figures that we've based on the income from the clubs is based on an element of rationalisation, so clubs potentially working together and potentially reducing the overall number of lets that they have. The figure that we've based that on is on a 50% reduction overall. I think we've been pretty consistent throughout that we've tried to take a relatively pessimistic view of that, so that we're looking at almost what we think is a worst case scenario, because we didn't want to bring figures that would, sort of we couldn't deliver upon. So that would, we believe would be the worst case scenario rather than the reality. But yeah, we have factored that into the report.
Thank you. I feel that it would be the reality. I think it is human nature that if prices go up, some people will not continue because budgets are limited. And I think a phased approach is the right approach. Looking at the administration amendment, I still think £40 is too high for the first year. But I think we do need that direction of travel. So I think with that answer and looking at the amendments in front of us, I'll be supporting the Labour amendment.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bundy. We'll now go to Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Provost. I want to say thank you very much to Cameron and Malcolm Benny and all the staff who've been involved in coming forward with this report. The Labour amendment last year was to say don't close the pools, come back with a different structure for pricing and see if you can make this work. And you've done exactly what we asked you to do, and I think we can commend you for that. And I know it's taken a fair bit of work, and I commend you for that too. We are not bringing forward a different proposal on the basis that we disagree entirely with their findings. We're bringing forward a different proposal because, as has been said by others, we're concerned that there may be the impact on some of the clubs and that people would go away and you wouldn't then get your money in. And I think that's the balance we need to be talking about. I'm so pleased about this proposal because when I first joined the council almost 2 years ago, I constantly heard the refrain from the administration of Falkirk has too many pools. And some senior officers came forward with the same statement. And I am so pleased now that the administration has listened to the people of Falkirk and has come to the view that perhaps we don't have too many pools and perhaps we can make these pools pay for themselves. Can I just check? Our amendment at point 3 says officers are empowered to explore all potential alternative pricing structures options. Can I have confirmation that could and would include 45 minutes versus an hour, the different scheduling? And can I have confirmation that our officers will work closely with the clubs to try and ensure that there isn't any loss of usage and therefore loss of income?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of supporting the clubs, we already meet with the clubs regularly at our Falkirk Aquatics Forum. And as you would expect, this is a there's a Falkirk Aquatics Forum which has representatives of all of the amateur aquatics clubs. Falkirk Council and Scottish Swimming are involved in that. So we are in ongoing conversation with them, and the intention is to continue that. In fact, to redouble that conversation, particularly following on from yesterday's decision. That'll be a priority, will be to meet with the clubs to find out, what mitigation can we put in place and how can we help them to adapt to the changes at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hannah. We'll now go to Councillor Benny.
Thank you. I just have a wee question. Just quickly say, swimming pools is close to my heart, actually close to even my grandchildren's heart. But I do have a question, actually. It's about energy efficient, and this is the key issue of the matter. It's the heating in the swimming pools, as a matter of fact. I want to find out in all the schools that we've got, is the heating systems the same or are they different? And if some are different, is there efficiency the carbon output, etc., and their energy efficiency different? Because that is something we really need to establish. Because in future, if we do want to keep these pools open, it's about getting costs down, getting their carbon output reduced, getting their energy costs reduced, that sort of thing. So it's regarding the heating with the school pools. The system that they've got, are they all the same in all the pools? Have we thought about putting in a heating system, maybe with a wee bit of money given to buy a new heating system, a wee bit investment that can bring all that down? Is that being looked at?
Okay, we'll go to
Thank you.
Mr. Catrick.
Provost, the short answer is no, the heating systems are not all the same. They are similar in that they will be gas boiler driven in the majority of cases. We do have to recognise that, particularly in relation to PPP schools, they're 25 years old, nearing. They will not be the same as the efficiency you can get from modern equivalents, and indeed some of the new technologies that are used, particularly through combined heat and power, that is now prevalent in most secondary schools, is not the case. There is work that can be done to improve the efficiency of them, and that has been done over the years. What I would state is that to replace heating in a secondary school, because the heating controls the school, not just only the pools, in many instances, is an extremely expensive approach to take, and the easiest way is to replace parts with more efficient parts when they do come to that stage, or to ensure that you have energy efficiency and measures in way. Pool covers is one of those, insulation is another, and also to put in renewable energy installations such as photovoltaics, air source heat pumps and things like that can lower the energy consumption. And then when you do get to that point, then you can make a decision on the harder elements, which is the efficiency of the heat.
Thank you for that.
Thanks very much, Mr. Catrick and Councillor Binney. We'll now go to Councillor Flynn.
Yep, thank you, Provost. Firstly, like many of the previous speakers, I would like to say I'm absolutely delighted that the school swimming pools have been saved. These are a valuable asset that, if lost, once lost, that would be them gone forever. And I would also like to compliment the officers and staff as well for the excellent work and hard work that they put in and putting together this report. I just wanted to touch on, Provost, if I may, on this question about the hourly charge. I do believe that when is it Mr. McTavish made the deputation yesterday, and I asked him the question about the 45 minutes. He said that there was 15 minutes that they paid for but didn't use. I'm sure he said that, but it's worth checking back in the recording there. I did, as a matter of interest, check quite a few other councils to see what their charges were, not so much in monetary terms, but in terms of time. And almost all the ones I checked were hourly rates. And in fact, if you look at page 288 of your own report, the private commercial lessons are based on hourly rates. So personally, I see no difficulty. It would be pro rata anyway, just making the aquatics club rate 1 hourly pro rata, and that would work fine. And the clubs then can decide whether they use it an hour or whatever, or 2 hours, 3 hours, or 4 hours. Yeah, and certainly, like my fellow councillor, Councillor Bundy, I'm more than happy to support the Labour amendment. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Flynn. We'll now go to Councillor Spears.
Thank you for your indulgence. Another question. The go-cards, if every member of that swimming club's got a go-card, do they get free?
So the go-card is, in terms of that, the free swimming is for individuals. Sorry, the go-card free swimming is for individual swimming, so it's a separate category of booking currently than we have. The clubs book it, they book exclusive use. The go-card is within a public swimming session. So the short answer probably is no.
Well, the whole concept of the go-card is that everybody's on an equal footing. If you can't afford then to join a swimming club, but you've got a go-card, that can't be taken into consideration.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Spears. We'll go to Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. I think we need to, while we have come forward with a scheme, we need to remember that the management of our school pools will always continue to be a challenge. We just have to look at what other local authorities are doing and the challenges that they're having and the discussions they're having around swimming pools just now. So, I think we just need to be mindful of that. And just also to say, had the radical approach of considering closure of school pools not been put on the table, I don't believe we'd have got to this point. I don't even believe this would have been considered if this had been the first point that had been brought forward, and it would have been soundly rejected by certain members. So I think while it has been torturous to get some decisions out of this council, that we have moved forward in bringing this in front of members. Working with the swimming clubs and having those discussions, I know that they have accepted that they've had enhanced fees for a sustained period of time. They've recognised that, and things aren't sustainable and it has to change. And I do believe that they are willing to work with us. And I think we have perhaps been a little bit coloured by one particular group that spoke yesterday. So I think we just need to be careful again of taking that as consistent across them all, because I do know that there's a lot of goodwill there within the swimming clubs to work with the council, recognising the challenges. The 3-year programme of phased charges still leaves a financial risk to the delivery of this as a programme, and potentially that not actually being a success. So that is one of the real concerns that I have, having brought this forward. And again, while administration are not entirely going with the officers' recommendations, because we do feel that would be a huge steep rise for the swimming clubs, to go to a 3-year programme, I think does put at risk, and will leave the council still financially challenged going forward. So that's why the amendment's been put forward, and I'm disappointed to hear that others aren't recognising that, considering some of the more difficult decisions we've had to take, such as yesterday. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Michaels. I'll go to Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you, Provost. And as previously noted, I'm content to second their support with our amendment. Firstly, I want to touch on the past 24 hours. We've heard and contributed to debates that have had a high degree of emotion invested, which is expected as we represent our communities and the district as a whole. But what I would say is that it's unfortunate that this council is in a position it finds itself today, and the decisions we take or don't take, as the case may be, weigh heavily on each and every one of us as a council and as councillors. Turning to the report at hand, as has been mentioned by others, an incredible amount of work was put into getting us to this stage, and the reason we're here is down to collaboration between services. So I'm grateful to officers in police services, sports and leisure, as well as our education service and head teachers, as well as others. These proposals are aimed at increasing income and usage of the pools, and it's important to note that this is a plan to get us to financial sustainability. And passing this report today doesn't mean that the job is done. This is a welcome report and certainly more positive than what we've seen recently, but we must be cautiously optimistic in getting us to where we want to be, and I accept that there is an element of risk with each of the amendments on the table today. My take from what we've heard from officers, in particular Mr Benny, is that there's a further risk to that financial sustainability with a 3-year phasing than 2, and I believe that our approach is right to be able to keep us on track towards what Labour's amendment at last year's meeting asked for. In my opinion, this would mean that a 3-year approach would likely result in conversations at a later stage, which would look further at the financial sustainability of our pools. It may not get us there. At that, Provost, I'll conclude and ask the Council to approve the report with the administration's amendment. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Sinclair. We'll go to Councillor McCabe then. If there's no one else, we'll go to Councillor Garner to sum up.
Thank you, Provost. I was very pleased to see the report come in front of us. It's a good report. It's a detailed report. I have a couple of questions of both the administration and the Labour group. Before I move to that, I actually find it a wee bit of a tortuous argument that we couldn't have had this report unless we threatened to close 4 pools. We could have had this put in front of us last year. We could have debated it as we're now doing. We didn't have to threaten the closure of the pools. So it's a wee bit tenuous, to say the least, that we're now saving the pools. I'll leave that in there at that. I had a quick look and kind of prorated the figures for the hiring of the pools. I bumped them up just very, very roughly to charges per hour. You know, we're in this quandary of 45 minutes to an hour or whatever. The administration are proposing £53 per hour in the first year, rising to £89 per hour in the second year, where Labour's figures are £33 in the first year and £47 in the second year of introduction. Now, given that we've heard that it'll prove challenging to these aquatics clubs and they are increases, I totally respect. And we do have to get to, Councillor Sinclair alluded to, financial sustainability. That's why I'm relatively pleased, as much as it's putting more pressure on our residents. We do have to live in the real world, and we do need to increase charges. So the move is welcomed. It's a good report. But I'd just like to ask whether I get an answer from either of the administration or Labour, how they arrived at those figures. I mean, obviously there's been some consideration taken of the national average. So I'd just like to hear from either or, Provost, just to explain to me, because to me, this is the fundamental argument. This is a kind of dividing line. We are going to increase the charges. Do we increase it as much as, or do we increase it as at that level? I'm just looking for a wee bit of clarity and see if we can maybe agree a consensus and move on. Thanks, Provost.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Garrett.
I'm happy to quickly come in that. Our figures came by officers. We went to officers and said it was a 2-year phased approach, and I'm sure that was pretty much the same as Labour's approach.
Okay, Councillor Steinbach, you want to?
Yeah, in terms of the phasing, I think we also consulted with groups next year, and I do have a question for Mr. Benny and Mr. Kettrick based on the debate that's went ahead. We engaged with officers in this one as well as with swimming clubs. As I said within our statement of the debate, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with the figure if we're designing a system from scratch, but we are currently with active users in the pool, so I think that has to factor in. I do have a couple of questions for Mr. Benny or perhaps Mr. Reid.
Could we go back to Councillor McCabe?
Yep, that's fine.
I appreciate both answers. I'm just, you approach the officers, Councillor Garner, and that's where you base your figures on. But again, your figure, and you alluded to the, apparently that's what the Labour group have done. That's great. Both of you have spoken to the officers. You both came back with different answers. As I say, administration 53 quid, Labour 33 quid. I just wondered where that figure has come from. You've obviously got your...
No, it's okay, Councillor McCabe. And it was through the benchmarking that was alluded to earlier on, and that's where it went through. As far as I'm aware, you'd maybe want to come in on that, Cameron, yourself?
Yeah, so in terms of the phasing over 2 years, we took what the projected price point would be in 2 years' time, and then the £40 was the midway point between that. So we needed to factor in a further price increase so that there wasn't a drag at that point. So the £40 is midway between where we currently are and where we're projected to be at the end of 25-26. So that's where the £40 sort of incremental came from.
I understand that. But again, if I look at the Labour figures, their figure is £33. Does that still arrive at the final figure, the benchmark? It appears we have two different benchmarks. I'm just looking for a wee bit of clarity on that, that's all.
I can see Councillor Steinbank's looking to come in, so I'll defer to him.
I'd just like to clarify another amendment that in the third year, which should be 26-27, would be moving towards the national benchmarking framework. I think the fact that the data we've got is from 22-23 makes it difficult to know what that point will be. I think what is reported back in 3 years will be different from what is reported, the best data we have now. I do have a couple of questions that might shed some light on how we got to our decision for officers.
What, do you mind if Councillor Steinbank takes?
It's just that just what Councillor Steinbank said there, Provost, it may explain it to me, and the fact that it looks as if the labour figures are maybe based on a 3-year projection, if you like, whereas I was assuming it was in 2. But as you say, Councillor Steinbank is just about to expand on it a wee bit, and I'm hoping that would clarify everything. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Steinbank.
I'll change the variation. I'm going to ask these questions, and Mr. Berry referred to a gear change in behaviour. Now, from conversations with swimming clubs, I won't name who, they've talked about cutting down the amount of hours they use in the pool by 40%, and by making sure that the pools are getting fully used throughout their sessions, as well as putting up their membership figures. When they communicated with me, they indicated that a fee of £23.75 per 45 minutes would be the ideal amount, which I recognise is lower than the figure we're proposing for next year. Is that sort of rationalisation of pool time, as well as increase in membership fees, the sort of gear change of behaviour you were referring to?
Yeah, so in terms of some of the conversations that we've had with individuals for clubs, there's been an acknowledgement that there's an opportunity for clubs to potentially work together with some of their sessions. There are some times where they have exclusive use of the pool, where they think that there's potentially some capacity within that would allow them to work together. So while that would reflect in a slight reduction in the number of individual lets, it wouldn't necessarily mean a reduction in pool time for the individual swimmers. So that's one of the factors that we think there's an opportunity for the clubs to work together. I am aware that there has already been conversations with individuals from some of the clubs around looking at that very thing, and that's something that officers are happy to support them with. There's a role for us to play in that in terms of scheduling as well. So it's important, though, the clubs have their own identity and their own culture, and we want to be part of that conversation rather than leading it.
Thank you very much. My second question is using the Sports Scotland data that we've referred to. I believe we based the benchmarking off swimming pool hire, exclusive use per session, conventional pool, which is an hourly figure. In that report, the minimum out of the 22 sample was £30. Now, obviously, this isn't the case in the average we're reporting on this, as I believe our hourly rate would be £16. What was our submission to that data set?
So the difference in that, which is that the clubs currently get charged a local agreement, a local rate. So our submission was £84, which is what if a new organisation which was to turn up, which wasn't an amateur aquatics club, would be charged to hire that facility. The price that the amateur aquatics clubs is a local agreement that so a special rate that they have carried over for a number of times. So as I touched on earlier, the benchmarking covers the average rate or the standard rate. It doesn't cover any sort of special agreements that clubs may have within their own local authority.
Thank you very much. And I think, Provost, that should satisfy members' inquiry that we're looking at a pathway towards the national benchmarking framework. But I think recognising the challenges amateur aquatics clubs are facing. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Steinbank. Councillor McCabe, do you any further questions?
No, I'm relatively happy with that, Provost. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll go to Councillor Redmond. He's got his hand up, then we'll close with Councillor Garner to sum up.
Yeah, I just wanted to just come in on the back of Councillor McCabe's question there. We arrived at our figures. We took the officer's report. We presented it to the clubs. They told us they could not survive at that rate of a rise. Councillor Steinbank was quite good. He asked them for what's your survival figure, the maximum you could do, and that's how we arrived at our figures. So we worked very much with the clubs to find a survival figure that's going to be sustainable for them, so that they've got a future in Falkirk, and that's how we arrived. It wasn't just officers like was alluded to earlier on. I also just wanted to say on the back of, we had to threaten to closures had to be threatened for this to come about. I don't buy that at all. I think threatening to close this was actually quite dangerous. We could have had swimming clubs withdrawn from Falkirk and they think all the pools are going to shut anyway. I don't think that's a good way for the council to proceed as we look to make savings and efficiencies going forward. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Redmond. There are no further comments. I'll go to Councillor Garner to sum up.
Thank you, Provost. Now I'll be really, really quick. I think what we've heard here is every single member being realistic in what we need to do and how we move forward while understanding the concerns of the clubs and users of the pools. It highlights we have listened and acted whilst realising the financial position we find ourselves in and do our utmost to keep our school pools open. There isn't too much between the amendments and both have the swimmers and young old at heart. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Garner. We'll now go to the vote.
Thank you, Provost. And the motion is as moved by Councillor Garner and seconded by Councillor Sinclair. It's been circulated, against which there is an amendment moved by Councillor Steenbank and seconded by Councillor Redmond, which has also been circulated. Provost Bissett.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
The motion.
Councillor Aitchison. I think you may be on mute, Councillor Aitchison.
Officer, this week Liz Smith endorsed.
Taken off. Sorry, amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Anslow.
Amendment.
Councillor Binney.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Brown.
Amendment.
Bailey Buchanan.
Amendment.
Councillor Bundy.
Amendment.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Deacon.
Motion.
Councillor Devine.
Motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Amendment.
Councillor Forrest. Councillor Garner.
The motion.
Councillor Hannah.
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly.
Amendment.
Bailey Kerr.
Amendment.
Councillor McCabe.
Amendment.
Councillor Meikle-John.
The motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, Colin, in the interest of transparency, I missed the start of the discussion, so am I able to vote on this?
Yes, I think if you're satisfied that you've properly had access to all the relevant issues, you were here,
absolutely.
I think, yesterday
I
for
was, yeah.
the deputation.
Yeah.
So I don't see a reason why you can't vote on this.
Yeah, I do feel informed enough that I'm happy to proceed then, and I vote for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Patrick.
Amendment.
Councillor Redmond.
Amendment.
Councillor Ritchie.
Amendment.
Councillor Sinclair.
Motion.
Councillor Spears.
Amendment.
And Councillor Steenbank.
Amendment.
Provost, there are 10 votes for the motion. There are 18 votes for the amendment. The amendment is carried.
Thank you. Mr. Moody will now break for lunch back here, 1:45.
Provost, since we've just not long started, would it not be a half-hour break be adequate?
Half an hour, that enough? Aye. Okay, agreed, half an hour. Well
Provost,
said.
Provost, can I raise an issue? And I've already spoken to yourself and my group. I actually have a medical appointment at 1:45, which I need to attend. I wasn't aware we were going to be breaking for lunch at this point. I thought we were just going to continue through till we finished.
Well, Councillor Nimmo, we've had members here who've been at the scrutiny committee since 9:15 this morning, so they do need a break. So we'll be back at 1:15. Okay, thank you. Well, welcome back, everyone. Next item of business, agenda item 8, strategic property review, pages 65 to 241 on your agenda paper. But I believe our two members wish to make transparency statements. Councillor Patrick and Councillor Kelly. Councillor Patrick, we'll go to you first.
Yes, thank you, Provost. In the interest of transparency, I'd like to make the meeting aware that I have a close family member who is an employee of Falkirk Council and currently works at one of the premises affected by the strategic property review. We're not financially connected in any way, and I've discussed the matter with Mr. Moody, and I've also applied the objectivity test, and I don't consider this connection is so significant that it would likely influence the decision or my decision making today, so I don't intend to take part in this part of the meeting.
Thanks very much, Councillor Patrick. We'll go to Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Provost. Similarly, I've got a trustee for one of the local community centres in the ward. Spoke to Mr. Moody about it and applied the objectivity test. And I don't think there's any reason for me not to take part in.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Spear.
Provost, likewise, I was chairman of two of the community centres for over 30 years, but I'm no longer chairman and I feel I can take part.
Thanks very much, Councillor Spears. Councillor Garner.
Provost, I explained mine yesterday, so I'm assuming that just carries on for today.
Noted. So we'll now go to Mr. Benny or Mr. Kettrick to speak to the report. Mr. Kettrick.
Thank you, Provost. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on the strategic property review following Council decision on the 29th of March 2023. Council is asked to note that we now have 17 expressions of interests in relation to community halls and community education centres for 16 properties, which is an increase in 4 since the report was published. We now have expressions of interest for Bonnybridge, Reading-Muirhead, Lauriston and Kersey Bank centres. Overall, there are now 32 properties within the SPR to progress to community asset transfer that are now subject to expressions of interest. Indeed, we now have, over the past 24 to 48 hours, a few emerging expressions of interest, including for this building, which will emerge over the coming weeks. As outlined in sections 4 to 5.1 and through to 5.9, there has been considerable activity across many stakeholders and communities to progress the strategic property review. And it's fair to say that this level of activity on the modernisation of the area's property assets is unprecedented. The number of expressions of interest and the activities undertaken is clear evidence of the efforts by the community groups, colleagues, partners such as CVS and wider stakeholders to bring us to this position. We will now be working with groups intensively to progress those expressions of interest to community asset transfer application and then determination stages as quickly as possible. To support this and to provide the full opportunity for community groups, Phase 2 properties subject to expressions of interest are recommended to be provided 6 months extension up to October to submit their formal asset transfer applications. This will provide us with a further 6 months for those properties to be conveyed to those groups, and that would be in adherence to the Community Empowerment Act timescales, which provides 6 months from the approval of an asset transfer request to transfer. Whilst what I've advised is generally positive position, there remains 10 community halls and centres recommended where there are no proposals. And until we have expressions of interest for these, they will remain at risk of closure. Those within Phase 2 recognising this position are outlined in Appendix 6. These will now progress, as I've said, to closure on the phasing identified and also based on the condition of the property, and I will come back to that subsequently. We would hope, though, that even for these properties over the coming weeks, groups will come forward with proposals because the support is available to assist them at every turn. As outlined in the table at 6.2, in addition to the CAT interests, we have 6 properties proposed for improved financial performance and 4 for alternative delivery models. Information on these is contained in the report and the appendices, and most notably include Stenhousemuir Gym, Grangemouth Stadium, Slamanan Community Centre and Cairn Gymnastics, amongst others. Where not already, these will be moved. The recommendation is to move these to Phase 3 to provide further time for the proposals to progress. Out with these, there are 22 properties that are identified for service retention and modernisation, and this is recognising that even in these circumstances, the savings associated with the SPR will be delivered, and these will be taken from the services concerned. This includes offices where we will continue to rationalise and modernise. There are stores where we will look at amalgamation and modernisation of our approach to these. As we have seen over the past few years, significant progress can and will continue to be made in these areas. As per the previous decision, Where there is no CAT interest, improvement to financial position, alternative delivery model or a service modernisation opportunity, the properties will close and then be subject to the surplus property procedures in accordance with the recommended phasing. For those considered in D condition, this will involve a 3 months notice period to enable users to relocate. As outlined in the report, considerable progress has been made in identifying these alternatives to closure of the properties, and a broad range of communities and stakeholders have supported this work with colleagues to get us to this position. But we should never not recognise that overall there is substantial savings that are associated with the SPR of approximately £3.5 million, with approximately £450,000 of that being utilised to support borrowing costs to provide enabling funds. To deliver the SPR as a single programme to ensure there is a consistent and transparent and effective approach to delivery is one I would deem that is appropriate. To remove or defer decisions on specific buildings would undermine that approach and add a risk and uncertainty to the savings, undermine the ability to provide the enabling funds, and this would hesitate communities in progressing their ownership aspirations. The progression of the SPR and the rationalisation of the council's estate is now critical given the financial positions we face, and we will continue to experience. The resources that would normally be expended on these properties can and will be diverted to those properties retained to sustain and, where possible, improve their condition and suitability for future generations. To summarise, the SPR, if agreed, will provide, or continue to be agreed in its proposed format, will provide the opportunity for the council to reduce its carbon emissions from property assets by nearly 15%, remove the challenge of backlog maintenance liabilities of approximately £29 million, deliver approximately £3.1 million of net savings, provide £3 million of investment in community properties to support community asset transfers, provide £3 million of investment in sport and leisure facilities that would otherwise not be available. And this funding can be used to lever and match external funds that the council is not able to secure. And we have a number of examples of where community groups are progressing such proposals. Ultimately, the SPR, whilst delivering savings and providing otherwise unavailable investment, is empowering communities to take over the management of properties that they consider are important to them, and it is encouraging the number of groups that are progressing proposals. I'm happy to take any questions, Provost.
Thanks very much, Mr. Keffett. We'll now go to Councillor Meiklejohn or Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to the officers for providing us with extensive information that we have come to expect in SPR reports. This provides all we need to know to allow us to make a decision. It's great to see the large number of community groups coming forward to take on properties, and I can include Bonnybridge community and an expression of interest. Well done to all involved, and I, along with my colleague Councillor Deakin, will happily provide you with support in taking this forward to a community asset transfer. To have 32 properties or maybe more, now I'm hearing, subject to expression of interest is very encouraging, and I truly hope that the majority of these progress to full CAT in community ownership. It is also encouraging to see those properties progressing to improve financial performance and alternative delivery models. I hope that by providing the additional time for these to mature will be welcomed by the partners and stakeholders involved and deliver innovative management approaches to preserve and improve facilities. The provision of the support to groups to develop their business cases, the enabling funds to contribute to CAT business cases, and the opportunity to attract external funds is all positive, and I would encourage everyone to get behind the groups and officers in delivering what is a truly innovative and transformative approach to the modernisation of properties that our community want to prioritise. Whilst there are huge positives in this report, there are obviously still some community centres and halls, together with a number of pavilions and other minor assets where there are no interests, and I would urge those interested in these to come forward also. It is also pleasing to see further progress being made on the modernisation of operational assets, with the continuation of programmes for offices and stores, as we have seen with the rationalisation of Denny Townhouse, Sealock and Abbotsford House. New ways of working can deliver financial savings and support the modernisation of services. I would concur with officers' summary of the SPR benefits, with the reduction in carbon emissions clearly important. If, as a council, we are to progress to our net zero ambitions, We have a circa £64 million budget gap, which programmes such as this are critical to bridge. Whilst we can't remove the short to medium term backlog maintenance cost, which is unaffordable to take on, we can actually deliver £3 million of investment to support community ownership aspirations. This is real, tangible support which would not otherwise be available if we continued to retain these properties. The response from the community is in engaging and progressing with the CATs, the work of partners to support alternative delivery models, and the efforts of services to improve financial performance and delivering savings, even for properties being retained or subject to further review, is testament that the SPR approach is the correct one and needs to be fully supported. Provost, I move these recommendations.
Thanks very much, Councillor Gardner. Do you have a seconder?
Provost, I'm going to formally second, and I'll reserve the right to come back later in the debate.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah, do you have an amendment?
We have an amendment, yes, which has been, has been circulated, and Councillor Steenbank will be proposing the amendment.
Okay, thank you. I'll just go to Councillor Bailey Kerr if he's got an amendment.
No amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Spears?
No amendment, but I'll come back with multiple comments.
Thank you. So we'll now go to Councillor Steenbank to move the amendment.
Thank you very much, Provost. As has been stated in the current financial climate across Falkirk and across the country, that community buildings must be valued by the service they provide to the community. Once a property is shut, it takes a substantial effort for a community to get something new on that site. It's far preferable to be able to maintain the facilities through any pathway available. There have been examples of successful community asset transfer that can be attributed to the initiative, passion and tireless hard work of communities. For a good example for members, look at the work of the Tamperell Community Hub in my ward. But those who are interested in exploring this option are aware that it doesn't come without challenges. They need concerted efforts to get the community involved and bought in which all elected members, I hope, have been supporting their communities in. Setting up SKIOs, developing essential relationships with external funders and partners. The capacity, resources and diversity of experience this requires has been recognised by groups, and many have been hard at work based on the timelines they have been given from the decision in March. This amendment seeks to secure the viability of this effort, while not putting the risk of imminent closure hanging over the heads of groups that are trying to prepare for a productive pathway to operating community facilities. Examples of community groups that this amendment will help: Bonnybridge Community Centre. Activities are distinctively provided there by the community: carpet bowling green, Happy Mondays Club, walking football, boxing, judo through the Yamarashi Judo Club, Model Railway Club and a scout hall on site, the latter of which that went to visit on the very kind invitation of Richard and Helen on Tuesday afternoon. There are promising asset transfer discussions with expressions of interest having been submitted, but as members have heard from the community, they often need more time to come to fruition. Falkirk Labour recognises that maximising the long-term future of productive and well-used spaces to serve distinct communities is a priority we must attach to this debate. Key to that will be guaranteeing that all of these spaces can sustain themselves into the future, making sure all options are exhausted and there is no timeline placed on them that will debilitate their ability to take on buildings. As many have told us, they're working to the timeline given and appreciating the variation in timescales some will require to achieve transfer. That's why we call for a later date to report back before any decision on closure in community spaces, rather than a prescriptive date. There are complex issues that have been highlighted by groups, such as distinct leases for parts of buildings, unknown or ancillary defects to the current core usage of the buildings highlighted in condition surveys, planned or expanded activity if they were to be transferred, and there are still apparent partnerships to be explored, all of which is necessary to developing organisations to the place to better hold the burden of asset transfer and make sure these spaces better serve their communities. I pay immense credit to the work of communities and officers since the meeting on the 29th of March, especially to Malcolm and Paul, who've put in a mammoth of work to get us to the place we are now with progressing expressions of interest. I think communities have been clear in several cases that they need more time than the timelines requested. It is up to elected members to afford them the time they require to deliver this asset transfer. It should be in the gift of elected members, once all options in our community centres have been exhausted, to make the decision on whether it is viable for the council to retain these buildings. The Labour amendment stands on the sides of communities today. This gives the best opportunity for those pursuing asset transfer. It makes it more likely that we'll see better performance from our community centres in the long term, whoever operates them. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Steenbank. Do you have a seconder?
I'll second and reserve the right to come back later in the debate.
Okay, thanks very much. So we'll now open up for debate. Councillor Spears.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to start with saying that all our communities are very different. You can have community halls in affluent areas where maybe people have more time to take on something that's quite a big business for people. Suddenly they're on the business register, they've got to register with Oscar, the charities body. And then you have other areas of multiple deprivation. I think the council needs to remain valid in these areas, and I mean by valid that they're providing a service, and that service is in the form of community halls. Because there is areas that are more affluent and can maybe take on the greater responsibility, and then there's other areas that are not. And I would remind everybody, we're here to represent all areas, not just our own area. If we can sort of a hatch at something that we get this hall or that hall kept open, we need to look at the broader spectrum, and we need to look at all our communities. And we're here to represent all our communities. So not all groups want to take on the running of their business. As I said earlier, I've been chairman of halls for over 30 years. At 2 halls, it is a lot of work. And it's even more work, and keeping up with legislation. You've got to fit a new kitchen. It's all got to be stainless steel and meet hygiene regulations. But they're expensive, very expensive. Now, you do get some help with heating. But up to date, these halls have been paying a rent. They weren't sitting there getting anything for free. The council charged them a sum, and the people were able to run that form of business. But what you're asking them to do now is something completely different. You're asking them to take responsibility for some buildings that I would like to say the ones that I was involved with were always kept wind and weather tight and painted every 4 years and stuff like that. But you're not going to make our deprived areas a desert in this vital community facility. I don't think we're looking at the big picture here, but we need to remember why we're here, and we're here to serve as communities. So I would have no hesitation in backing the Labour amendment, because there's an awful lot more work needs done here before we just say we're shutting your hall or we're selling it off or somebody else is interested. And you as elected members will get the same as I get everywhere you go. People are concerned, very concerned. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Spears. We'll now go to Billy Buchanan.
Thank you very much, Provost. Could I say this at the very beginning? I'd like to thank Councillor Steinbank and Councillor Redmond for the work they've done with Bonneville's Community Centre. Come out there for a meeting and discuss, and they've been very proactive. Provost, I wrote this out last week to read out. Since then, there's been a significant change. An email from Mr. Kettrick, which I've included in the latter part of this statement, stating quite clearly that there has been an interest shown for the community centre. I'm going to read it out anyway, Provost, just maybe to bore you, but anyway, it's Provost, being an elected member on this or any other council means that you have been elected by your constituents to represent them on issues relating to areas defined as remits of the council, and to ensure you use your position in the best interests of your community. It's unfortunate we only have a limited time to speak at council. This can be quite frustrating, but understandable considering the number of elected members who would be desperate to speak on behalf of their constituents. Today is a day of great importance to the future of my community, with the threat of closure to the beating heart of the community of Bonnybridge, and that is the community centre. The detrimental impact on my community if this closure was to go ahead would be catastrophic. Bonnybridge Community Centre has over the years been, I believe, the busiest centre in Falkirk District, with a tremendous variety of usage, with so many local groups using the centres. Groups of all ages see their visits as an integral part of their lifestyle. This centre would have a really serious effect on everyone who uses it. Mental health is a major worry in our society today, and this proposed closure could have serious increase in mental health and physical health and well-being for those who use these facilities within the centre. Young and old alike would suffer greatly through the loss of this centre, and the effects to all would be serious and lasting. I won't waste the time I have questioning this whole process. Are all communities aware of the consequences of this report? I really doubt this. When our centre was opening, I flew back from Australia for the opening, and when I eventually came back in the early 80s, I worked for Central Regional Council and had an office in the centre. Throughout the past years, I have ran cinemas, road races, fundraisers, concerts, historical events, slide shows, and numerous one-man shows to many of the groups. It was only a few weeks ago that I helped out, as I do annually, with the centre's Members' Christmas Day. So I speak from the heart as one who has over 40 years used and supported this centre, and I would be devastated and angry if this proposal to close would be supported by members. Probably should be glad to know this is the conclusion. In conclusion, could I say that we have an opportunity to go forward with a hard-working management group running the centre at present, providing a great service to our community with many new and exciting initiatives. And we must have due regard to the council employees and their families for their future. I received an email from Mr Kettrick yesterday with some positive news that the council has now received an expression of interest from Bonnybridge CEC. This means that it is now rated as a D-rated property, with the deadline for closure going to be extended to October. One major positive issue is a proposal put forward by a very professional local businessman that could secure the centre's future. Mr Kettrick included in his email he was going to continue to work with the management committee and the community, and really importantly, to include private sector interests, if appropriate, for securing the centre's future. And that's what we all want, to secure the centre's future. Bonnybridge Scouts set up in Bonnybridge 113 years ago, and they have had the upper part of the centre since it opened. They currently have a lease with the council agreed in 1998. I received an email from the leader of the group, and they told me that they had not been contacted by anyone regarding this process and the proposal to close. We've heard Councillor Steenbank that he was talking to them, so it might be interesting if Mr Kettrick maybe could come back on that question, because obviously they're an integral part of that community centre because they have an area upstairs. Provost, I will say quite openly that I will fully support any councillor who is fighting for any safeguarding of any facility in their area that supports the community. So I ask you all, please support my community to secure Bonnybridge Community Centre's long-term futures. Thank you, Provost, and thank you, members. Bonnybridge community is like everybody else is listening. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Billy Buchanan.
Mr Kettrick, if we could maybe come in on that point, Provost.
Absolutely.
I got an email, Mr Kettrick, from, as you know the situation. You're a wonderful officer, and everybody knows that. But the fact is that we know that upstairs, that the community centre upstairs is the lease, and they've been in that Scout Hall since the day that community centre opened. They said that they have had nobody contacted them regarding the proposal to close or any other initiatives. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Mr Kettrick.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the kind words of Bailey Buchanan. In terms of the Scouts are aware, as many of the users in the community centre have been for the past year, of the risk of closure in relation to Bonnybridge Community Centre. And local elected members will know I've been out to a number of meetings, and my colleagues have attended a number of meetings. CVS, who are helping a whole range of groups across the community develop their business cases, have also been involved with the management committee. We even have had a proposal with Scottish Power Energy Networks to look at improvement works to the centre. In terms of the situation we have with it moving to a deconditioned property, we felt it was appropriate that that information was brought to elected members and derived here before we spoke to any users of any groups to determine how elected members want to deal with that. So, you know, I'm happy to provide apologies to the Scouts for saying that I bring it here first before I then go out to engage with communities, and that's just an unacceptable part of the process from their perspective, but that is the process from our perspective. We have written to the Scouts outlining the position. They're required to be provided 6 months' notice, and the council must use reasonable endeavours to identify alternative premises for them should the site be redeveloped. From consulting and looking on that, if the centre was to close, it would be demolished, which is a form of redevelopment potentially. And so we feel that we can provide to satisfy the conditions of the lease the appropriate notice. However, as Bailey Buchanan and the elected members will know, as will others, we've written to the management committee and Scouts. We really hope now that there's an expression of interest in that they can come together collaboratively, including that interest that Bailey Buchanan mentioned from the private sector, and work as a single unit to take that interest forward. I would say there has been multiple opportunities to do that, but we are where we are, and I'm really encouraged that they've now taken that initial step, and we'd be happy to work with them in securing the future of that community centre, like many of the others that we've seen across the area so far.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll now go to Councillor Redmond.
Thanks, Provost. I've just got a few questions, sort of similar along to my line of yesterday. So, compulsory redundancies. We've got a fantastic team, Martin and Joy, that work in the Bonnybridge Community Centre. Well, what will their options be going forward? Will we be offering them jobs elsewhere in the council, or could they be facing redundancy?
Mr. Keswick?
I would be reluctant to get into the specifics regarding any individual in a public forum, but the approach we've adopted across all the SPR and has been formed part of the briefings we've gave to members is there is a number of vacancies across the council. Where a building closed, and we will be looking at the options of redeployment. Some people may decide at that point they don't want to be redeployed. They may want to be considered for voluntary severance. They may look at alternative locations to work. They may look at retraining for other roles that are within the council. But ultimately, and this is something that we have discussed with the unions and with our elected members at the briefings, is there could be a risk of redundancy where those other options were not considered. But much of that will depend on the wishes of the employees, but also what comes forward in terms of the future of those buildings.
Thanks for that. So that's good to hear, honestly, there. The enabling funds, I asked this yesterday, but obviously we've now had a decision on the enabling funds. £3 million has been taken out the enabling funds. And just to clarify, it's been mentioned it's going to sport and leisure today. Is it? I thought it was going to Bowness High School, but is it now just going into the sport and leisure capital project?
The report from yesterday, Provost, highlights that the money will be used to look at the feasibilities of sport and leisure provision and access to high schools. It does not specifically say that would all go to Bowness. I think in the report from yesterday, Braes and Denny are also mentioned, but it's not an exhaustive. It's not a defined list. I think we're looking at the access to schools in general.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So, obviously, I said yesterday about my concerns about that. I think it's very disappointing that the SNP and the Conservatives voted to take £3 million out the enabling funds. You know, in one of the statements it said £450,000 of borrowing was to deliver enabling funds, but that's not the case now. Only half it's to deliver enabling funds, the rest it's going to high schools. I think people in Bonnybridge are really frustrated. You know, we were told the centre wouldn't be closing until early 2026. We've now been told this year, on top of that, we'll be given a repair bill for over £1 million. On top of that, the enabling funds has now been cut in half. So that was my other question on the enabling funds. Of the £3 million that's left, how much of it is already allocated?
Mr. Kendrick.
Just to highlight a couple of points, but I'll answer the last part first. In respect of how much has been allocated, nothing has been allocated. We've identified some notional sums, including Slimanan at potentially £500,000, but any proposals for use of the enabling funds will come forward with the community asset transfer requests and will be allocated by elected members as part of that process. And the expectation is that funding can be used to lever in other funds and also used to support the sustainability of the community asset transfer. A number of groups we know are looking at things like photovoltaics, energy improvements in buildings and things like that. In terms of the point of the £3 million on the enabling funds, the enabling funds still remain at £6 million across the strategic property review. £3 million has been identified as part of the report that was presented yesterday on Bowness Recreation Centre to look at sport and leisure provision. And as you'll note, Provost and elected members from the report on the SPR, there is considerable sport and leisure facilities in there, which may come into that. So this is about looking at it very much in a wider sense, the sport and leisure provision, and looking at the secondary schools where they can come in and help support that. So that, just to be clear, that's where the 3 million and the 6 million is.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Kendrick. Is that all your questions, Councillor Redmond?
Yeah, well, I was just wanting to say a wee something. I wanted to echo absolutely everything that Councillor Buchanan said. Bonnybridge Community Centre probably is one of the best community centres, well, best used community centres in the whole of Falkirk, I'd say. It's a lifeline for older people, younger people alike. You know, Councillor Nimmo brought up yesterday our 20-minute neighbourhoods policy. If Bonnybridge Community Centre closes, where's our closest hall? Denny or something? That's just not an acceptable walking distance at all. There's so many clubs that depend on this centre, and it's really, really concerning. And I think one of the main reasons why we do need this Labour amendment that it comes back to the council is because the enabling funds has been taken down to £3 million. It makes the community asset transfers look a lot more harder now, and it's very, very concerning about that. I really hope that everyone will back this amendment, because we need to say Bonnybridge needs a community centre, and it's completely unacceptable that Falkirk Council thinks that we can just close down Bonnybridge. I'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Redmond.
Before we move on, could we please have clarity, because that is absolutely misinformation that Councillor Redmond is saying in relation to the enabling funds and the 3 million that's been taken out of it. So can we please have some clarification again from officers on that?
Okay, Mr. Kendrick.
Yeah, Provost. I mean, I thought we had been pretty clear in that there is £6 million identified in terms of the enabling funds associated with the strategic property review. Yesterday, elected members made the difficult decision on Bowness Recreation Centre, and as part of that, there is £3 million now been allocated from the enabling funds. As part of the enabling funds is the better way to look at it, to be identified for sport and leisure facilities, particularly looking at how they're used at the school. So that's how it's been set up.
Mr. Berry.
Thank you, Provost. I want to be really clear as well, though, because, and apologies, Councillor Redmond, if I'm picking you up wrong, but the sense that I get is that you see that Bonnybridge requires £1 million worth of backlog maintenance, and that
No,
£1
that's
million.
not what I'm saying. That's what the report from Curry and Brown said.
Well, no, but I hadn't finished what I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies.
So that there's £1 million of backlog maintenance at Bonnybridge, and that £1 million would have come out of the £6 million of enabling funds. And I'm quite clear that that isn't the case. That was never the case, that the £6 million was going to be some sort of ladle that went out around fixing all the properties. What it is an amount of money that helps communities take over buildings and allows them to take on buildings with match funding. But it isn't that, because we would not have, I think, is it not £25 million, £29 million of backlog maintenance across the strategic property review buildings. So the £6 million was never, ever intended to be the whole, the place that you filled that hole. The £6 million is a method by which we can help communities take on buildings. And based on the engagement that we've had from communities, £3 million is our estimation of what we need to help those communities take on those buildings. So again, I don't accept professionally that we have undermined community asset transfer based on the recommendation that we put forward yesterday.
Councillor Redmond, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, I would like to come back in. At the start, it was said £6 million enabling funds to enable community asset transfer. We've now changed that and it's going towards improving community access to school. So we went for £6 million to enable communities to take over the buildings to £3 million to enable the communities to take over buildings. And as Malcolm quite rightly pointed out, there's £29 million worth of backlog maintenance. We didn't expect the £6 million to cover that, but the major issues, category D issues, the £6 million would have hopefully went a good way to getting that covered. But now we're £3 million down, because whilst it might still be called enabling funds, it's not enabling community asset transfer. These funds are now enabling community access to school, which isn't how they were first advertised. So I think that is a completely truthful statement that I've made. I really reject the statements that it's misinformation.
Okay, you want to come back on that?
Well, perhaps I can maybe provide a bit of clarity here also in terms of the process for the enabling funds, which can maybe provide the assurance to elected members, and in particular Councillor Redmond. The allocation of the enabling funds and the drawing down of it will be based on community asset transfer requests that come forward. We do not know how much those sums will be in total yet, but we do know that those enabling funds are being used to support things, as I've mentioned, like boilers, like the installation of photovoltaics, to make the buildings sustainable. As we know from the Curry and Brown report, there's a number of items identified in there that fall into the category of wind, watertight and statutory compliance. We've identified in the report there's approximately £330,000 worth of works in that category across a number of buildings. Those works will be done by the council out with the enabling funds to bring buildings to those stage. As we move forward, there may be further works that are in that category that need to be undertaken at the point of transfer of the property. We will continue to commit to do that to give communities the best chance. The enabling funds are directed towards communities looking forward to try and make their buildings sustainable, or to support their business model in attracting other funding. We know there is 2 or 3 groups have identified the potential use of enabling funds for match funding from other organisations, and that is the whole purpose of the enabling funds, is to potentially lever in other funding to make their business model sustainable and to undertake those works that are needed for them to help do that. But in advance of that, and I'll reiterate again, the council will provide the buildings on a statutory compliant and wind and watertight basis. And I'll just clarify that wind and watertight basis. If a roof is leaking, we will patch it. We will not replace the roof. That is something then that has to be considered as the long-term sustainability of the group in running the building. But we know there is one group in particular who've said they will take the building on. They will install solar PVs. They will use the council's match funding, which is allocated to replace the roof, and they will take that approach to it. And I think that's the type of approach we would be encouraging lots of groups to adopt. And they will come back here to this forum, to council executive, as part of the community asset transfer proposals.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Bundy?
Thank you, Provost. It was just, I think, to try and get more clarity on figures, because a lot of figures are being bandied about just now. Following yesterday's vote on Bowness Recreation Centre, how much is left in the enabling fund to support community asset transfers?
Yeah, it's currently 3 million.
3 million.
Yeah.
And how much would have been left if the decision was taken yesterday to keep Bowness Recreation Centre open?
I think, as we highlighted in the bonus recreation report yesterday, the level of savings associated with bonus recreation centre would have taken those enabling funds down to just under £700,000 across the whole of the SPR at that point.
Thank you for that clarity, because it shows that yesterday's decision means that there's more money for the community asset transfers of other buildings rather than less money. And that's what the impression that was being given in Councillor Redmond's questions. I think it's also important to get the rationale explained for bringing forward community halls that were in phase 3 forward because of category D ratings. Could you, Malcolm or Paul, just explain the rationale behind bringing these timelines forward?
Provost, very much similar discussion as we had yesterday. These D-rated properties, you know, are clearly their condition is clearly defined as being bad, life expired, and/or serious risk of imminent failure, potential risk of injury, and therefore we need to take action on these. The status quo does not apply, and it is very unfortunate for the groups who are in those 4 community centres in particular, Bainsford, Green Park, the Grange and Bonnybridge, all of whom have been engaged thoroughly throughout this process. 2 already had expressions of interest. 1 has just recently put us an expression of interest in it at Bonnybridge. The Grange, we still hope something will come forward. It would not be appropriate for us to bring forward, to not bring these forward when we are aware that there is a decondition rating there. We have to put in place now risk mitigation measures in these buildings, particularly around electrics, the monitoring of roofs, the monitoring of areas that have identified that may be at or beyond life expiry. But we're still really confident we can work with community groups to take on these buildings and work with them on investment models, securing additional investment and developing business plans for their future use. One of those buildings, for instance, has a number of temporary units, and we already know part of their proposals is to consider how they would deal with those going forward, and that's the type of thinking that we're looking to engage with communities on.
Thank you for that answer, Paul. So the logic is the same logic behind bringing the Blueness Recreation Centre forward yesterday?
It's absolutely a consistent approach, Provost, to yourself, Councillor Bundy, and I think it's a pragmatic approach, but it's also a logical approach in terms of how this council deals with risk and its assets going forward.
So it would be unfair for the people of Blueness if we made that decision yesterday on that premise, but then were to discontinue the recommendations to bring forward. So it would be treating similar situations differently.
Well, yes, I would concur with that, and I think, as I highlighted in the introduction, the key thing about the SPR, irrespective of property, is we are consistent, we're open and we're transparent, and we make sure that we continue to have that all the way through, because that is one of the fundamental principles of the SPR, is we do not get bogged down in individual circumstances. And whilst they're all unique and the solutions may be unique to get the desired savings and to sustain the builds in the longer term, I think we've got to be consistent in our approach to decision making.
Thanks, Paul.
Any other questions? Really care?
Thanks, Provost.
Got it right this time.
A few questions. I mean, we know that at the start of the report, Paul mentioned the amount of cat transfers that were brought forward, but we're hearing that there's 1 or 2 others. So can I get an actual amount now, how many CATA or IFPs we actually have now?
Provost, in response to Bailey Kerr's answer, we have 32 properties with expressions of interest. We have 1 full CAT application for Banknock Community Hall that's there. We have, within the SPR, we have approved 1 CAT, which was the Sunnyside Pavilion. We have 1 additional CAT, which is in its application. We have, and I think I've highlighted it in the report, and I'll just check the exact numbers, because this has literally been a moving situation. I think we have 6 subject to improved financial. My notes. We have we have 22 properties identified for service retention, 6 properties proposed for improved financial performance, and 4 for alternative delivery. I listed them in a table in the report, and that is on page. Yep, it's on page 74. Okay.
Just taking in Cognisis Labour's amendment, how many of these are community halls or leisure sports facilities? Sorry, can I rephrase that? How many are not in that list?
It would literally be the bothies and the stores that would fall out with that list. All the pavilions, all the community education centres, the sporting facilities such as Grangemouth Stadium, the ski slope, all of these things would fall into that definition.
Okay. Have we got a team in place? I know you and your team have went out and supported many groups and committees. Have we got a team in place that would support people with financial guidance, with guidance of the law? I don't know what that comes under, but is that part of what your team does, or are we another team that's?
Obviously, we have CVS supporting us, and CVS have actually been recruited even more new people. Everybody recognises this is one of the largest community asset transfer exercises in Scotland that's ever been done. The level of activity is completely unprecedented. We're currently in the process of recruiting another colleague to support our community asset transfer processing and those questions that CVS don't deal, which is how does the council determine activities. There is also support available through Shared Prosperity Fund. There is funding through the Community Empowerment Fund for groups to go and get external third-party support. We know there's a number of groups who've appointed their own legal advisors. They've used that money to help support their Oscar applications, to develop their their two-tier scale models. The level of support that is available is pretty substantial. And the key thing, as I've said to all groups, is if you're not sure, come and ask, and we'll direct you in the right way. But there is definitely, would we like always more resources? I think yes, but we've got to be pragmatic in terms of how we deal with these. There's a lot of work for the communities also that we undertake.
Thank you very much, Paul. And probably leading on a question that Councillor Redmond asked regard redundancies. Do we envisage any of the transfers, cut transfers, and keeping any of our staff?
Provost, the transfer undertaken in protected employment regulations, TUPE transfers, TUPE regulations would apply in the instance of an asset transfer. As we've seen at Grangemouth Golf Course, that opportunity was available to the staff if they wish to transfer. Some may not wish to do that, as happened in that case where they chose to stay within the council, and it's pleasing to see that is all resolved, and it looks like they will have other roles very similar to their existing roles within the council, and that opportunity will still be available to all staff through the strategic property review process. Again, that consistency of approach.
So I'm just trying to get to a scenario where, whether it's the golf club or the ski slope, if the cut transfer over and the employees stay, then that CAT transfer fails a year, 2 years down the line, what position will our staff be in then? Will it still be the same move to voluntary redundancy, or
Provost, that would be a matter then for the organisation that they work for at that point, which would be the community transfer body that takes on the property. At that point, they would no longer be council employees, and therefore they would have to be dealt with on that. But clearly, under the 2P regulations, they would carry over terms and conditions that organisation would need to deal with, and it would be up to them how they dealt with that going forward in terms of the level of protection. But that again would be for their employee relations to manage going forward. But at the initial point of transfer, they would transfer over with the same contractual obligations as they have with the council. Obviously, then that would be subject to them future negotiations at the appropriate time with the organisation that they then work for.
That was the answer I was looking for. So thanks, Paul. I don't know if you've seen, I keep on getting added into this email, Paul, but it's regarding the Old Folks Hall at Girder Park, and it's former councillor Craig Martin, who was part of the committee. They've 22nd of December, they're saying that they've asked for contents and of information. Can I ask you just to try and liaise?
Provost, more than happy to deal with that. And what we'd point out is that property isn't part of the strategic property review.
I was looking for it and I couldn't find it.
It's not there. The property was actually damaged by a substantial fire a number of years ago. There is a challenger insurance position there as to the building and whether or not it can actually be retained. And we're working with colleagues to try and identify the position on that. But I have myself been out there, seen the building, been in it, which probably I shouldn't have done at the time when I realised what it was. But we're happy to engage with the community on any aspirations they've got for it. But I would highlight it's not actually part of the SPR. But as with any building, we will always look to try and support communities to take on ownership.
Okay. And probably leading on for the previous speakers, it is important that we try and engage with all our communities. Some of these halls are lifelines to the communities, and I'm glad that Green Park Centre, they have some big centre, and they have got a committee together to try and transfer it. Like yourself, I'm hoping that somebody comes for the Green Centre. I'm glad that the Lauriston Centre now, when I spoke to them before Christmas, well before Christmas, they thought they had, but I think the letter last week to push some ons, because they're a good wee committee. They're already a scale. They've been for years. But another one in my area, Redmuirhead, doesn't actually own that, and Shield Hill Welfare Hall Council doesn't actually own them. Is that correct?
Shield Hill, definitely the council does not own, and the title's quite clear like that, but we've always taken the view we would treat them as if it was owned by the council and provide the community with that support, despite the fact that it would be the community have to sort out the legalities of taking on the ownership from the former trustees who technically no longer exist, and there's a legal process for that. And the good thing is that support is available for them to do that. On Redmuirhead, it's an extremely interesting position, and Mr. Callaghan from the committee was actually here yesterday, and I spoke to him. And we have a situation where the property was owned by trustees, looked as if it had been conveyed to a previous authority of us. That agreement was never signed and put into place, but the parties have acted as if it was. So there's a potential issue there of an acquiescence of agreement. But again, we have said we will treat them as if they are owned by the council and part of the SPR, and give them the same access to the support that's available to other groups. And I'm aware that they have had and may have got or are about to get their community empowerment support for that legal advice, and we look forward to working with them. Yet another committed community group taking forward a proposal.
And probably my last question, Paul, and it's very important for me regarding Labour's amendment, because they're asking on point 2, should an asset transfer or new business model for the community halls or leisure sports and facility not come forward or not succeed, then the property will close and the decision on that facility will come back to council for a decision. So how many halls or sports facilities does that involve? No bookies, no offices, because they're only asking community halls and sports and leisure facilities.
So in terms of those outlined in the report, the community centres, there was obviously 10, and that number may change depending on the expressions of interest. Actually, I've just had it pinged up here. Thanks. There is 10 that would be in there, but that would be the expectation that we do get Maddiston and Grangemouth, so that would potentially come down. On the basis that things like Grangemouth, the ski slope, Carn Grange are all forming part of that additional alternative delivery model, improved financial performance model, then in effect, if they did not come to fruition, they would all be the ones that would close. The question that I would have is how long do we give for these to happen? Because while we have deadlines, people are focused, people contribute, as we've seen with the amount of activity we've seen over the past week. People have now increasingly become focused on this. And if there's nothing at present, do we expect that something will mature in 6 months if they can't even get a 2-page form in? But is it 6 months, or is it a year, or is it longer down the road? So I think we need to be clear as to where we are setting deadlines. We stick to those deadlines, and we try and encourage communities to achieve those deadlines. Clearly, if there is an application in, a community asset transfer application, we're bound by statute how we deliver that in terms of those timescales. And ultimately, that's 6 months for to get an application in. There is then legally another 6 months for them to actually convey the property from the council, or we can start the process again. So I think we've got to be clear on that.
Right, okay. And that was my last question, but one just came up. With regards to probably what Bailey Buchanan and Councillor Redmond mentioned, Bonnybridge has gone to October. Is that because it's category D, and is it all the full place category D? Why can it no stage 3 and go in next year, or if it's that bad?
Provost, there's a number of elements within the condition assessments that have been undertaken which highlight D bad rated. There's a lot of items in there that are identified as A, B and C all the way through. It's the overall rating of the building that is the concern, and that is D, and it's those elements that we will be paying particular focus to, and that is, we're looking at weekly property inspections by the maintenance team. We're looking at the responsible persons for those buildings basically doing daily checks and observing those items, and it's been put back to October. Normally it would be 3 months, but it's been put back to October because there has been the expression of interest. That level of activity in one single building with the resources that are available is pretty intense, and it just simply cannot be sustained. The other thing is that the longer we go on, and it's the same discussion we had yesterday, the longer we go on with these life expired items where there is that risk of failure, there is an increased chance that the building would have a failure and the building would close in effect from that point because of the sums involved to repair it. That doesn't allow us to manage the transition of groups to other locations, and it doesn't allow us that opportunity to manage that process, and that would be a worst case scenario as a kind of hold it to wait and see. So again, I think as we've done with Green Park, we've done the same with Bainsford, we will do the same with Bonnybridge. It's 6 months to get that asset transfer application and to work with us on basically getting it to a community ownership model that's sustainable.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Billy Kerr. We'll go to Councillor Brown now.
Thank you, Provost. Paul, I just want to thank you and your team for the encouraging discussions and meetings I've had along with Atterberg and other members in Shield Hill and also ongoing in Slamanan. It's positive to see these discussions taking place, but we're still in a situation where Slamanan this week, the heating has been completely off. There's been issues with heating and the centre hasn't been able to be open. Classes haven't been able to take place, etc. So we're in a situation where these buildings are at a point where you've clearly mentioned at risk of failure. The pressure is on, obviously, for Slamanan Community Centre. We're having a proposal, which I think is a fantastic proposal. The main issue being is getting the collective groups behind that and taking on that ownership. I'm keen for those discussions still take place, but I am conscious that time is dragging on and there is clear issues with these centres. And what do we do in the immediate time to resolve that, to allow the centres to be used and functional?
Provost, at the moment, it's status quo. The heating will be fixed, it will be repaired, and we'll continue to meet our obligations as we currently do in terms of maintaining buildings. And, you know, we welcome that further discussion with Slamanan, who we know there is multiple groups there who we would like them to come together. That investment proposal for Slamanan and the work that could come through, particularly levering in additional funding aspect of it, would actually go some way to resolving those heating issues that we seem to keep having. So, you know, again, and it's a similar scenario we had at Bonnybridge where we were looking to secure external Scottish Power Energy Network funding, and again, that would have helped alleviate huge parts of those items that are identified as life expired, particularly in relation to heating and electricity.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
That's all for me, Provost. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll go to Councillor Hannah now.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to just ask one question and then perhaps encourage us to bring this to a close by seconding the amendment. First, the question I have, first of all, is these properties that have now been identified as Category D and have been brought forward from and are being brought forward from Phase 3 to Phase 2, they didn't suddenly get into that condition the day the condition survey was done. Did they?
I think the harsh reality of life is for many local authorities is that the condition of their estates is such that there will be many buildings that are C, D rated across the whole of the country, and it isn't something that just happens overnight. It is a gradual decline, particularly the issues around about life expired elements and the risks associated with them.
And in relation to a number of them, the condition has been known for some time. It's not. It's just that we now have a report.
The council has reported as part of its performance, as it does with its schools, the category of properties that is standard practice A, B, C, D. But until you actually resurvey them and then verify that, you can have buildings that remain in a condition that is inflated above what the actual reality is, and you've got to really keep checking them. But likewise, there is works can be done to a building that can improve that condition, and unless that's recorded and put in place, you could actually be under-reporting. What we have done is we've taken a baseline, and I think it was mentioned yesterday, across all the SPR properties, both internally and externally, to establish what the condition of those is, because it also helps support the future investment decisions and the business models of the communities. We don't want to be them going into a situation where they don't know what the condition is and what the potential costs could be to them of taking on these buildings over the longer term.
Thank you. Thank you. If I may now make my statement in support of the amendment, please. Is that not acceptable?
Okay, carry on.
Okay, thank you. The discussion that we've had here today has been very clear in terms of the fact that there has been a considerable level of support from communities for their centres. And I think we all have to recognise that our communities have said loud and clear, we do not want to lose our facilities. I think Mr. Kettrick referred to the level of interest, the level of community asset transfer as unprecedented, and described it as one of the biggest across Scotland. So I think we have to recognise the size of the job that's being undertaken here, and give thanks to the officers who have worked very hard to make this happen. And I think that is all very important. Also, though, what has been said is how complex this process is for those communities, how complicated it is to get those organisations together and to get them working together. In some cases where there's more than one organisation involved in putting forward an interest, where there are a number of different organisations with different aims. So it is complicated. There are a variety of groups, and there will be a variety of solutions in any of these community asset transfers. Now, officers have worked hard. I know this because I know how hard I've made them work, as have the community groups. And CVS has also done a great deal of work. But I have had a lot of comments from the community about how difficult it has been to get in touch with officers and get answers to things. Now, I am not in any way, shape or form criticising officers, because I know there's been a lot to be done and I know there's been a lot of demands, but that's the way it's being perceived in some communities. Mr. Kettrick has already said that there's going to be an additional appointment, which is clearly a recognition that the officers are being stretched in terms of giving the level of support to the number of organisations that are asking for community asset transfer. It's just a fact of life. If there are lots of different organisations, there's only a finite number of people to deal with that. With that in mind, the Labour amendment here is about saying, can there be some greater time given? And please do not close these centres without coming back to council to say, we've tried everything. We've made every effort to get a viable community asset transfer or a viable alternative model. And it hasn't worked. There are some of the centres that, as you have recognised, that there are 4 of the centres which have been where the process that they thought they were going through has been brought forward by a year. Now that is a lot for those organisations to take on. For some of them, it's they're being permitted to have an extra 6 months till October. In my ward, there are two of those centres, the Green Park and the Grange. Now, if this report goes through as it stands, as things currently stand, the Grange will be closed in April. Green Park in October, unless action is taken. Now, that's a very short time scale for the organisations using the Grange. Things like the after school club, for example. It's a very short time scale. It has also been acknowledged that in relation to another of the centres in my area, Reading Muirhead Community Centre, there's been debate about who actually owns it, and it is still not resolved who actually owns it. And in that situation, it's really difficult for the community organisations to come forward and say, yes, we can do this now.
Hannah, that's you in your last.
I do apologise. All our amendment is trying to say is we want to be assured that all efforts are made to see that no centre is closed unless every possible attempt has been made to give support to the community. I know officers are already doing that, but we are simply asking for no precipitate closures and that it be brought back to council.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hannah. We'll go. Councillor Bowes, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just wondering, what have the communities actually got to supply to council by October? Is it the full cap package, or is it just the basic application form?
Provost, the community asset transfer application form is what is required, but that should be supported by the business plan to allow us to make the evaluation of the application quickly, rather than making a submission and then back and forward trying to get information. I mean, what I would say is that, you know, this is nothing new. Everybody's had a year already. We have asked for a 2-page form to be submitted, and I think, you know, we've had a lot coming forward. If we do not have fixed timescales on these, a number of groups will continue to just keep with the status quo, because the status quo is quite good, where the council does all the work in terms of looking after the buildings. They take the income from the buildings, and then in effect we continue to have that to sustain. The key thing I would be expecting is we need set fixed timescales and what is required, and colleagues have the resource to deal with those when they come in, and with those additional resources that we've got, that will be sufficient to deal with that. And if we need more, we will add more.
So I'm saying there'll be evaluation time and discussions post that time.
The best practice, and it forms part of the Community Empowerment Act, is that you should have those expression of interest, and you have pre-application discussions. You develop your business case. CVS are geared up to deal with that, picking up things like financial modelling, HR policies, all these types of things. There's a lot of information there, and there's a lot of support there. But picking up Councillor Steenbank's point, the community has to be committed to be doing that. Nobody says it's easy, but it is very much possible, and the timescales we've set, we believe, are realistic for them all to do that.
Okay, go to Councillor Michael John now.
Thank you, Provost. Those that have been on the council for some time will know that as far back as 2016, council was advised that we had too many properties and needed to rationalise, as we could not afford to keep them all. Many already with a significant backlog of repairs required. Falkirk Community Trust at that time, and repeated on many occasions, that there was a need for capital investment in our leisure facilities, and there were a number of properties that were at or nearing end of life. Hence, that was why there was an attempt to acknowledge that and begin to address that with investment proposals in 2019, which were rejected. Since then, there's been continued reticence to make difficult decisions within the SPR, focusing on rationalisation of our built estate on backroom buildings, continuing to skirt around the community and leisure buildings, which we all acknowledged is difficult to do. The SPR strategy, having been put in place and agreed by members, now needs to continue to be implemented if it is to be effective. Cherry picking will dilute the outcomes and further constrain the council's ability to have a sustainable and affordable built estate that is able to deliver modern and quality services across the district. This has been further reinforced by the conclusion from the recent condition survey. We know that £29 million of investment will be required to bring all the properties in the SPR up to standard. That is not improvements, that is just standard, with some that need to be done in the next year or so in order to meet the health and safety and compliance, with others required within the next few years. Why do we have a backlog of works? Over an extended period of time, and a successful political administration have made choices which were focused on maintaining low council tax, low fees and charges, along with high service provision, and probably for the right reasons at that time, but did not take cognizance of the longer term planning, and the continuing that trajectory would leave the council with the inability to transform, invest and create quality modern facilities for our citizens. It is really heartening and good that has been so much interest from our communities, demonstrating that they want to work with the council in partnership. Taking on these buildings will be quite empowering for them, and to deliver services within their communities to meet their needs. And I do sincerely hope that there are others that will come forward and be geared up to provide that support. But what we also have to recognise is the size of the CAT transfer process that we're in, and why we have that. And that is because we are lagging well behind other local authorities in making these decisions around rationalisation and community participation and support. Hence the reason we have acknowledged that in order to enable those buildings to transfer, there needs to be that enabling fund and allow the communities to develop the plans. But what it does mean is that others have to be let go. So if we don't set, so that we don't set communities up to fail with a building that is beyond or at end of life, so that they do not have the sustainability and be able to be maintained within the community. And I'm thankful to Councillor Bundy for going through what was a bit of a painful process around understanding that enabling fund, but that was really helpful to be able to do that. I think it's important to be honest with our communities, and the fact is we can't afford to keep all those buildings, and some are no longer fit for purpose and should not be transferred into the community, nor do we have the ability to provide the investment to carry out all the works across those required. We do, however, need to invest in new modern energy efficient buildings that are fit for purpose and meet the expectations of our citizens. It's just not possible to do both. What the Labour amendment does is create inequity in pulling out certain buildings where there are no community asset transfers. It will not give confidence to our communities to take that process forward if indeed, as Mr Kirkpatrick has said, the status quo can be maintained. And that's why we really need to move forward with the SPR and the report that is before us today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Meikle-John. Did you have a question, Councillor Garner, before you sum up? Or?
No, it was to sum up.
Okay, well, I think Councillor Ritchie had her hand up.
Thanks, Provost. It's just I can't find it anymore because it's Appendix 7, but it's Blackness toilets. I know that there has been discussions regarding the toilets, but they've stopped just now for a good reason. But it's just to say that the Blackness Community Council will be back in touch to start taking forward again. So if we can just update that, so we know that is going to be happening, because we can't let these toilets close. No, with the John Muir Trail and the amount of people that we get down there walking and whatever. But they will be in touch next week again about that. The cabin at the new Carden Cemetery, I've sent on to you, Paul, and there's a meeting next week for the Douglas Park Pavilion as well. So that was the two that I was in contact with you with. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Ritchie. I would just like to ask Mr Kirkpatrick about the Grangemouth Museum, the warehouse. What's the plans for that? All the artefacts that we've got over the years that we've stored, what's the future for the heritage of it, really?
Yeah, so just tell you any fears, we're not shutting or putting out in the street all the artefacts that we've gathered over the many years, and they'll continue to be preserved in the appropriate way. Those stores have been identified as part of our stores rationalisation programme. They're not generally accessible to the public, so we have less concerns about them, despite the fact they're D-rated buildings. So we'll have to deal with those, and we'll put the risk mitigation measures in place. But colleagues are taking taken forward a programme of how we look to modernise and rationalise our stores, and that's why some of the smaller ones that are mentioned in the report are all being taken together. We have 4 types of stores that we need to accommodate. One is the environmentally controlled artefact items. We have paper records that are required to be kept secure. Those could relate to things such as the child abuse inquiry, where we still have to keep those records. We have general file storage and general equipment storage that just needs to be dry and secure, and that includes things like baby seats and general documents. And then we have the more traditional storage of equipment, things like that, which does not need the same level of environment. What we need to do is quantitatively take that across the whole of the council. Traditionally, these have been managed by individual services. And so the aim is that we will bring all the stores together into whether it's 1, 2, or perhaps even 3 buildings, so that we then can sustain those in the longer term also.
Okay, thanks very much. Deputy Provost Balfour.
Thanks, Provost. Just a question on the paper that's stored. Is there any option for at least some of that to be scanned and stored digitally?
Provost, the response to the Deputy Provost's answer, the short one is yes. And as we've seen from the relocations from Abbotsford House, Denny Town House and Sealock House, there has been huge amounts of archived activity undertaken with things now scanned and stored in the appropriate way, which is also very good for data protection purposes, because it can then be much more easily located.
Okay, do you have any idea how much, or percentage-wise, you'll be able to do that?
Unfortunately, I don't, Provost. I don't, Deputy Provost, know what the quantity is on that until we get under the hood on that one.
Okay, right. Thanks, Provost.
We'll go to Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Provost. And it's just a question for Mr. Moody. Obviously, I joined this debate quite late on, and it's just to check with Mr. Moody whether I can actually vote on this item of business. I'm obviously well aware of the situation and the report that's before us, but I'll leave it up to Colin.
Okay, Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The standing order, which requires members to remain through the whole of the debate before voting, doesn't apply to items of this kind. It's intended for items such as those before the Planning Committee, licensing matters, that kind of situation where it's absolutely essential that you hear every aspect of the submissions before you. I think, Councillor Nimmo, provided you're satisfied, you're aware of the contents of the report and the issues involved, and you're aware of the motion and amendment that's in front of you, it would be appropriate for you to participate.
Thanks very much for that, Colin. Thanks, Provost.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Nimmo. We'll now go to Councillor Garrett to sum up.
Thank you, Provost. And if I can, I'd like to compliment your good self and how you've managed to chair today's meetings and indeed yesterday's meetings. We all know these have been very contentious issues, so I think credit is due there. It's good to hear so many passionate words from elected members, and it's good to hear Councillor Brown mention Arthur Berg and his work. I'd also like to mention the work put in by Kenny Gillespie, CLD, and the communities team as well, who have played a big part in this. We're all elected to represent our communities to the best of our abilities, but we need to have a financially prudent approach. Provost, let me just highlight a couple of facts. My first ever public meeting as elected member back in 2015 was at a community centre looking at a community asset transfer under the then Labour administration. And one of their councillors has asked for the SPA for many years. Officers have now worked extremely hard with the communities in bringing forward reports and members' briefings. Again, I'll go back to a part of my opening remarks. It's great to see so many community groups coming forward to take on properties. Having these properties subject to expression of interest is very encouraging, and I truly hope as many as possible progress to full cap and community ownership. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Gardner. We'll now go to the vote.
Thank you, Provost. And the motion, which consists of the recommendations at paragraph 2 in the report before you, is moved by Councillor Garner and seconded by Councillor Meiklejohn, against which there is an amendment which has been circulated, moved by Councillor Steinbank and seconded by Councillor Hannah. Provost Bissett.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
The motion.
Councillor Aitchison.
Amendment.
Councillor Anslow.
Amendment.
Councillor Binney.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes,
Motion.
Councillor Brown,
Motion.
Bailey Buchanan,
Amendment.
Councillor Bundy,
Motion.
Councillor Colley,
Motion.
Councillor Deacon,
Motion.
Councillor Devine,
Motion.
Councillor Flynn,
Motion.
Councillor Forrest, Councillor Garner,
Motion.
Councillor Hannah,
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly,
Amendment.
Bailey Kerr,
Motion.
Councillor McCabe,
Amendment.
Councillor Meiklejohn,
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo,
Amendment.
Councillor Patterson,
Amendment.
Councillor Patrick,
Motion.
Councillor Redmond,
Amendment.
Councillor Ritchie,
Amendment.
Councillor Sinclair,
Motion.
Councillor Spears,
Amendment.
and Councillor Steenbank.
Amendment.
Provost, there are 15 votes for the motion. There are 13 votes for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Thanks very much, Mr. Moody. We'll now take a 5-minute break before we finish off with review of polling districts and polling places. Thank you. Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. We'll now move to agenda item 10, review of polling districts and polling places, and we'll go to Mr. Laurie.
Provost.
Oh, my apologies. Bailey Kerr's got a point of clarification.
It's regarding the pool item, and I asked if the 45-minute per session, and I was told it was pro rata. I've been contacted through Councillor Flynn by a member of the public who has a vested interest in the pools, and they have says that they have 2-hour sessions at Greensmouth High School and are charged 3 45-minute sessions, and it's not pro rata. This is despite the fact that the pool closes at 9 p.m. So they couldn't use it for extra time if they wanted. But clarity on that.
Okay, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to apologise to Council. That was a incorrect piece of information, and that bookings are in blocks of 45 minutes. I've asked officers to look into what flexibility we can do to support the clubs on a 1-hourly booking, conscious of the fact that that would disrupt a kind of current swimming schedule. So it's something we'll look at, and I said to Bailey Kerr that I'd be happy to report back to Council when we bring the report on the updated sort of progress of the charging structure, and we can see how we get on with that.
Okay, you happy with that?
Of course. Thank you very much, Mr. Bain.
Thanks very much. So, agenda item 10, we'll go to Mr. Kenneth Laurie for that.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, everybody. So this is another long and detailed report in front of the Council today. However, my intention is to introduce it really very briefly and propose an approach to dealing with the business in what I hope will be an efficient manner. So in terms of the report itself, Section 5 sets out the process for the review of polling districts and polling places. It includes the changes to the UK parliamentary constituency boundaries and the interplay with the strategic property review. Section 6 sets out the consultation process with the details of the online survey at Appendix 2A and a summary of other feedback in Appendix 2B. Section 7, taking account of the feedback received, shows the proposed changes to the current polling scheme for elected members for consideration. And Section 8 then sets out the summary of the proposed polling scheme, subject to decisions taken by elected members today, of course, and the recommendations are set out at Section 2.
My proposal, Provost, is that we consider the polling scheme on a ward-by-ward basis, go through it on that in that way, and I'm going to ask Colin to take us through that process. But perhaps just before I do, I'd like to say that my colleague Dale Robb is also on the call to assist with questions that members may have. And I'd just like to express my gratitude to Dale and also Ewan McWilliams for the amount of work that's gone into this, the good work that's led to this report being brought forward today.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Thank you, Mr. Laurie. Now go to Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. And just maybe before I go into the ward-by-ward process, there'll be some consistent themes which emerge in those. So just say a couple of things around those. There are two probably significant factors have led to the proposed changes. One is the recent parliamentary boundary changes. So we all know that we will have new UK parliamentary boundaries to work with in relation to the polling districts. The second, which you will see referred to consistently, is the impact of the strategic property review, which is obviously very much in members' minds today. You will see as we go through each ward that there are a number of places where the existing polling place is impacted by the strategic property review. And because of that, it's been necessary to identify a new polling place. But also consistently is the clear position that if the existing polling place remains available, so for instance, if a CAT transfer takes place, the polling place will remain as it is. What will happen is that the returning officer and his staff will obtain permission from the body running the hall now, and it's also, I think, useful to say that that's a source of income for the community body running the hall in future as well for elections. So just those two general points before I move into the ward by ward basis. And when it comes to wards, I think I'll simply make a general comment for each of them. I think it's an opportunity for the local members in particular for that ward just to comment on any of the proposals and just maybe confirm that members are satisfied with what is being proposed. So we begin with Ward 1, which is Bowness and Blackness. There are two polling place changes which arise from the SPR. One of them, there is a CAT transfer application for Cowden Hall, Community Hall. The other one is Bowness Recreation Centre, so obviously it falls into a different category. So I'll pause there because I see Councillor Aitchison has his hand up.
Councillor Aitchison.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. It's just an observation.
You're on mute. You're back. You're off.
Yeah, I was off. It just takes time for use to use it a bit behind what we are. It's just really as an observation, and probably much the same for all wards. I noticed Bowness Recreation Centre closed now, so we'll revert to St Mary's Roman Catholic Primary School, which used to be a polling station. And the thought many years ago was to get away from educational establishments because it was impacting on children's education. Unfortunately, looks as if schools have got to be the only resources that the council have within some communities. So yeah, it's just an observation that I'm concerned that we're moving back to educational establishments impacting on children's education. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Councillor Ritchie.
I've got the same concerns as Councillor Aitchison. Is there nowhere we could bring like porta cabins in to the car park at the recreation centre, and then that way we don't actually have to get the children to miss the school that day? Because I know that by going to the parent council meetings, that was a big problem at the time, because at one time there was about 2 or 3 elections in the 1 year, so they were losing the day at school each time. So is there any way we can do the porta cabins instead of disrupting the bairns' education?
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Laurie for a reply.
Yes, thank you, Provost. So I just wanted to say something about the impact on education, and it is set out in the report that when we have electoral events for which we can plan, and that applies to most electoral events, we know when they'll take place. What we've done is ensured that the in-service days at school have aligned with the election date. So there's been no impact on children's education. So all primary schools have been closed on the relevant day. I suppose the other thing, which is perhaps worth saying, is we're looking, aside from any by-elections, we're looking at 3 electoral events every 5 years on average. So I think we can generally manage these with the use of in-service days, and I think we've been successful in doing that previously. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you. I would have echoed that precise comment. It is really only in relation to the UK parliamentary election. So we're talking about potentially once every 4 or 5 years that we would have an unplanned disruption in the use of a primary school. So, Dale, I'm going to bring you at this point just to say if there was any consideration to the use of mobile units and what view you might have in relation to the practicality of that.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Good, thank you. We do use mobile units when we need to use them, but there is a cost. I don't have that immediately to hand, but there is a cost, obviously, for bringing them in. We also have a statutory requirement to have every polling place accessible to all. So we need to make sure that everything is risk assessed and assessed in terms of accessibility. Obviously, schools are accessible and are they're obviously well utilised, and with a frequent footfall, there are greater risks associated with using mobile units, which is why we keep it to a minimum. But we can use them. Part of the issue, though, is the location, the siting of the mobile unit itself has to be cleared. It has to be safe for use as well. So depending on what's happening with the land that you're looking to put it on, would need to be clear well in advance of polling day that would be safe for electors, whether on foot or whether coming by car or by foot, can actually make their way into where a mobile unit is. But it is a possibility. It can be investigated further if need be.
Thanks very much. So back to Mr. Moody. Oh, Councillor Spears wanted. Councillor Spears.
I'm jumping the gun a wee bit, but it's the same question. So while we're on the topic, I would like to do an interjection about the Old Town in Grangemouth. If we were to lose our community hall, but I believe there has been interest shown in it.
You want to wait until we move on to Grangemouth, Councillor Spears?
I know, but it's the same subject, so while Dale's on the topic, I'll wait
if you don't mind. So we've done Boris and Blackness, and what Grangemouth is next.
Yes, thank you, Provost. I think that the point. Thank you, Provost. So we have the situation where, yes, the alternative is posed as a primary school, but I think we're balancing against the fact that it's only going to be used once every 4 or 5 years in a manner that causes any disruption, and the accessibility which Dale describes against the use of the mobile accommodation on a site where we don't know what the condition of the site will be at the time of an election if the facility, as was decided yesterday, is moving towards closure. So I think my assessment would be that it would be better to stick with the St Mary's Roman Catholic Primary School as the polling place at the moment, and that would be my recommendation. I'll ask Kenneth if he's content with that as the returning officer.
Okay, Councillor Ritchie, you have another question?
It's not actually a question. I was just going to ask if Dale could actually take that forward to say about the module units going on, because it is land outside the recreation centre. There's going to be nothing on it because it's not done for building houses and local planning, whatever. So I don't see what the problem is with actually putting a module unit there instead of going to St Mary's and disrupting the children. The Bears lost that too much time in COVID they're still needing to be at school as much as possible. I'm sorry, but I just feel when I go to the parent council meeting, this is going to be brought up, and I know it's only once every 5 years. I understand that, but I would like it to be taken forward to see if you can do it, Dale. We've got plenty of time because there's not supposed to be an election until what, October, November, December. So.
Hey, thanks very much, Councillor Ritchie. I think Mr Moody and Mr Laurie laid out their position there, but I'm sure Dale will note your concerns.
Could I, sorry, Provost, through you, I would just add the number of electors allocated to Bowness Recreation Centre is 3,000, which we would normally then have an average of between 800 and 1,000 electors per polling station. So you're looking at 3 mobile units on site plus 3 toilet units as well. So it's not an insignificant area you're looking at, and you're obviously tripling the cost that we normally have per mobile unit. But I'm happy to do the sums and come back to you. That's not a problem at all.
Right, thanks, Dale. That would be great.
Yeah, thanks very much. We'll now go back to Mr Moody.
Yeah, I think given that there's a clear desire by one of the members in the local area to do something different from the recommendation, it would be useful to know the views of the other members in the Bowness ward too. I think Councillor Devine has that.
Yeah, Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, I think there's the same opinion. There's car park at Bowness Recreation Centre. Certainly the lower part is extremely large and it is flat, more than ample space. I'd be quite happy for that to be taken forward. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Devine.
Hi there. On first looking at this, I totally get it that I wouldn't really want to use a primary school, don't really want my child to be off school. I totally get that. But as the Chief Executive and the returning officers already laid out, we can plan for this round in service days, which means there will be no impact to a child's education if we are using this building, unless there is a snap election, which unfortunately none of us in this room are in control of. I totally get that. If we had another option, great, but we don't, and I think this is just where we are. On the mobile units, I do have concerns about that with regard to how much money it would actually cost. We have sat here time and time again since I've been elected, talking about budgets, talking about how close to the wire absolutely everything is in the financial position that we are as a council. If we're taking decisions, then it needs to be based on financial. If I don't want to put any officers out by having to go and do any additional work, because that's time, which is money as well. But if the other 2 members desperately want those facts and figures, then I would suggest that they would have to come up with where that's going to come out the budget, so that it can be presented forward. But I personally don't have an issue with it being in school as long as taking into consideration what the Chief Officer has said around in service days.
Thanks very much.
Provost, could I ask a question? Just across the piece, there are other schools that are used currently just now as polling places already?
Yes, there are some schools already used. Dale, I wonder if you might have some examples of those.
Sorry, just the schools being used as polling places?
Yeah.
Yep, they're just all listed in the polling scheme. We've quite a number. We've managed to reduce it over the years, but we still have several. We still have in the Bowness area, Deanburn Primary School. I think it's the only one we've managed to get alternatives for that one. We don't use any at the present time in Grangemouth. We have Nethermains in Denny. We have St Bernadette's Primary School, Kinnaird Primary School, in the more sort of built up areas where there's less alternatives. But again, it's accessibility as much as anything. We have, bear with me, Bonnybridge Primary School, and then we have some of the smaller primary schools in the rural areas as well. where you would have Drimbowie, for instance, Lauriston Primary School, Hall Glen Primary School, which we've only started to use that again in the past, or use that in the past few years following the closure of Hall Glen Sports Centre. So that's just a sort of random selection, just skimming through the polling scheme. So we still have quite a few.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Yeah, Dale was quite correct in our opening statement where they had tried to get away from primary school, but I'm just concerned that this is perhaps a backward step that we're taking. But just a point of clarification, would the money for cabins, etc., whatever else, not be made by the UK government and not Falkirk Council?
Yeah, Mr. Moody.
That's correct for the UK parliamentary elections. For the Scottish parliamentary elections, the money is met by the Scottish Government, but for the council elections, the cost is borne by the council. So it's a mixture of who bears the cost.
Two out of the three would be negative, so thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Richardson.
So I think, Provost, what we have here is we don't have a consensus or an agreement. We have a majority of the local members with a concern in relation to the use of this primary school as the polling place. I suggest that this one is not agreed and carried forward, and we'll investigate the cost and viability and bring that aspect back before members at a later date. Dale, is that practical so far as you're concerned in relation to the time scheme for publication?
Yes, that should be fine. If there are any difficulties, I'll get straight back to you, Colin. Thank you.
Okay, if we move on then to Grangemouth, we can see there's a number of changes proposed here to polling places, again associated with the strategic property review. The same considerations apply in that if the original polling place is available, it will be used. If not, the alternative has been identified.
Okay, go to Councillor Spears.
Thank you. The old town in Grangemouth, if we were to lose the Dalgreen Community Hall, I think we would need to put a temporary polling station in there. There's difficulty at the moment where the kids are being taken off with school transport and they have to walk across the busy Earls Gates roundabout, and a lot of our senior citizens don't have transport. And I know we're trying to be carbon zero in this council, so it would be best to have a localised polling station rather than walk all the way across to either the Bean Cross Primary School.
Okay.
I think, Provost, if Councillor Spears is referring to Dalgreen Community Hall, as I understand it, the alternative that's proposed there is the Grangemouth Town Hall. It's not Bean Cross Primary School. If that assists.
Councillor Spears? Mr. Moody, could you go over that again?
Yeah, at the Dalgreen Community Hall, the alternative that's being proposed is Grangemouth Town Hall, not Bean Cross Primary School.
We'll go to Councillor Namo, see if he's got any comments on this.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. There's obviously going to be a common theme running through all the wards in relation to the use of schools. We seem to have jumped back in time in this respect, with the prospect of having to use schools again because of the impact of the SPR. Councillor Aitchison was quite correct. If we're not left with any other buildings, then the only thing we have left is the schools. Now, this paper might be in relation to the Westminster elections, but the same could be said about all the elections that we have going forward. If we just don't have the community halls to use as polling places, then we're still going to be using the schools for the Scottish Parliament polling places and for future council polling places as well. I'm just wondering, is there any possibility of using libraries as a potential polling place. Okay, it might not apply to Grangemouth with the library just being across the road from the town hall, but there might be other areas in the Falkirk Council district that libraries could be used. In the future, with the elections, is it proposed to use in-service days to cover all of these elections if the schools are going to be used as polling places? I've not heard anything on that so far, but I've got serious concerns about the use of the schools again. We're going backwards.
Okay, we'll go back to Mr. Moody.
So yes, thank you, Provost. And just to confirm, it's not just for the UK parliamentary election. This will be your polling scheme for council elections and Scottish Parliament elections too. And on the point in relation to the use of in-service days, to re-emphasise the point made by the Chief Executive, where we have the date of the election, which is the council election and the Scottish Parliament election, in-service days will be planned round about the use of the schools. So there won't be disruption to children and families in relation to those two electoral events. We really are only talking about the UK parliamentary election where it doesn't have a fixed term. So this is once every 4 or 5 years. In relation to the use of libraries, I'll pass back to Dale to see if libraries were venues that were considered to any extent or suggested to any extent in addition.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, we do have one proposal, and that's to use Larbert Library instead of the Trist Community Centre. We did that before. Members, some might remember that, have been used maybe 6 or 7 years ago when work was ongoing at the Trist Community Centre, and we used Larbert Library then. So having had it operate successfully in that context at that time, it's proposed again for Ward 5. That'll be. So it has been done, and it's Ward 4. It has been done before, and it could be done again.
Thanks, Dale. Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Provost.
Yep. Thank you very much. We'll go to Deputy Provost Balfour.
Thanks, Provost. I'm quite happy with most of that. The Balgrain, there is an interest in, as far as I'm aware at the moment. There is another group that may be interested as well, if that falls through. So hopefully that will be transferred okay. There is a bit of a concern about the several older people, people without cars in the old town. It is quite a distance for them to walk over to the town hall. So a localised porta cabin would be useful if that is required. The other ones I'm quite happy with. They're quite sensible alternatives. Thanks.
Okay, maybe Mr. Moody could summarise what's been said on Bellicare.
Thanks, Provost. I know it's not my ward, but just when Councillor Spears was talking, and did Provost Balfour regarding elderly people, you've got the rugby club across the road. I'm sure they've got a big hall. They could maybe, if the grain falls through.
So I would suggest here, just to summarise, Provost, we have concern from
Provost. Sorry, Colin. Councillor Gunn. Apologies, Colin. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just I've had an email there, and it's an offer. It's for Falkirk Council wide, and it's for the Deputy District Commissioner, Falkirk District Scouts, offering up the Scout halls, wondering if that'd been an option. And he does say there's Scout halls in Bowness, Grangemouth, Lauriston, Falkirk Town Centre, and Bells Meadow, Larbert, Stennismuir, Dunnypace, Denny and Torwood. So that's an offer that could maybe be put forward and see if that's any of them are feasible.
I think it's something that could be taken on board in any cases that are identified as not agreed in relation to today's suggestions. So that's those where there are concerns being identified. And I think in relation to Grangemouth, I think what we're talking of here is the Dalgreen Community Hall. And as the Deputy Provost properly observes, there is a CAT interest in relation to the hall. So it may or not arise that any changes needed to be made, but I hear the concern from members in relation to Grangemouth Town Hall. And I think, Dale, if this could fall into another of the categories where there's further investigation, in this case of the mobile unit, or alternatively the rugby club as suggested by Bailey Kerr, and if appropriate, any of the scout halls referred to by Councillor Garner.
It's good to see people are watching online and coming in and offering help.
Indeed. So we move, I think, then, Provost, to Ward 3, which is Denny and Banknock. We have one change of polling place, which would arise from the impact of the SPR, which is the Banknock Community Hall. There is a CAT transfer application in relation to that premises, so it may be notional rather than actual. There is also a change in polling district, moving some electors from the Fankerton Village Hall into Dunipace, and that's arisen directly from, I think, community feedback on what's the best polling place. So I'll pause there to see if there are any comments.
Councillor Colley.
I think obviously that first element makes a lot of sense, and actually listening to the public consultation in terms of where people vote, and obviously Banknock Hall, as all of the members for the area know, is well progressed with its CAT, and hopefully should be over the line relatively soon. We cross fingers.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, I've already spoken to the proposed people to take over Banknock Community Centre, and there's no problem there at all. They're quite happy with the income.
Councillor Garner.
No issues at all. Happy with the proposals.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moody.
Just in case Councillor McCabe wants to say.
Oh, Councillor McCabe, my apologies.
No need for apology, Provost. I've already checked where I get my highest vote, and it's not changing, so I'm quite happy with the proposals. Thanks.
I think we can count those proposals as agreed then, Provost. Thank you. Moving on to Ward 4. That's Carse, Kinnaird and Trist. Again, it's just a series of changes in polling places occasioned by the strategic property review. So all the same situations apply. And we do see the example, as Dale said, of Larbert Library as the alternative, just picking up on Councillor Nimmo's point.
Okay. Councillor Flynn, did you want to comment on your ward?
I don't have any particular issues. The only one thing I say is that there's probably a meeting soon regarding some groups that may be interested in the Ayr Community Hall, which if it goes through would probably not change. I'm sure they'd be glad of it. But apart from that, I'm happy with everything that's been proposed personally. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll go to Councillor Angelo.
Yeah, on the whole, I'm happy with what's being proposed. The only two things I would say is regarding the primary school, Earth Community Council has had a lot of problems getting rooms in there, so I don't know how that would impact on using it, whether the council would have an overview say on that. And the other thing is, yes, I'm aware of the meeting. The meeting's been raised by me to push through the Earth Community Council because I'm very keen for the management committee to take it over.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Angelo. Back to Mr. Moody.
Might as well I'd be in as well.
Well, smart. How could I forget you?
Easily, quite easily. Overall, quite happy. Yeah, and I know something that Councillor Garner mentions later, but we're not the only people that are doing SPR at the moment. It's Church of Scotland are, and so there's always a bit of concern about Stenhouse and Calm Parish Church. But hopefully that will be okay. There is it's changed a couple of times. I think Stenhouse Mere Primary has been a polling place, and then St Bernadette's has been. And whatever side of that, it's a rather big spread of an area. It's a long, and I'm talking about people walking it rather than people being able to drive. So if you are in Jameson Avenue and you were having to walk from there up to St Bernadette's, it's actually quite a long walk when people across the road are going to the Stenhouse and Calm Church, which is a couple of minutes walk away. Now, the difficulty is, and I'm just asking the question, it's all in one box, and I don't know if you can split a box, but you guys can tell me.
Neil, that's one I'm going to pass on to you. And I suppose the question is, as the polling district has been put together, is there a way of splitting it to make it more a polling place more accessible? But I'll come back to yourself, Dale.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, polling districts can be split, and we just need to justify the reason for doing that. We did have quite a lengthy consultation period for this exercise, and all councillors were invited, as were members of the public, and just the electorate in general, along with community groups, to contribute to this. So there's been quite a lot of opportunity for some of the discussion that we're having today to have been had beforehand, which would be very helpful in the compiling of the report. So yes, it can be done. Whether it could be done for this particular time, or whether we press on with this and do that next time round, is obviously a question for elected members to determine. The other part, something else that crossed my mind while we were talking about that there, yeah, the decision to move to St Bernadette's primary school was because less children would be impacted upon with using a smaller school, a newer school with better accessibility, but a smaller number of pupils. So that decision was taken at the last review to allow that change to be made. And we can't all be on the doorstep of a polling place, unfortunately. So those people who had to walk a distance to get to Stenhousemuir Primary School, they are now benefiting from having a polling place on their doorstep, and those at Stenhousemuir are having to make the distance. So it's the same distance regardless of which direction we're going in. But as I say, we can't have something to suit everybody. But yes, we could probably consider splitting the polling district, but we just need to give a bit more thought rather than a decision being taken on that today.
And that's absolutely fine, Dale. It is actually the constituents' comment is actually their concern about walking distance. And we did find that the people from the Jameson Avenue, Kinnaird Avenue area were having to be sort of nudged to go and vote because they were saying, "Oh, I've got to go way up there." And you're right, it was the other side, it was the other way around for the people in Atkins Hill, having to go the other way. So I appreciate you considering that.
Okay, Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, just a quick mention, and I do appreciate the difficulties for a lot of people when they go to vote, especially with mobility issues. But we must always remember there are postal votes. People can register for postal votes, so they don't need to even leave the house. So, you know, it's worth remembering that people can do that. And I see from the numbers more and more people are voting by post anyway. So it's just a point I wanted.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr Moody.
I think it's a very helpful reminder from Councillor Flynn, Provost, just of the availability of postal voting sits in the background of this as well. And he's absolutely correct. There are growing numbers of people choosing to vote that way.
Then does the post get uplifted?
Could you let Mr Moody finish first, Councillor Spears?
So as we're going through the proposals then on Carse, Kinnaird, Tryst, there seemed to be general agreement with the proposals subject to the issue which has been raised by Councillor Bowes just in relation to the shape and size of that particular polling district and the allocation of the polling place. I suppose the final question is that of sufficient concern to hold this particular review back, or is it something we should keep on file for consideration for the next polling review to potentially split the district?
I'm content for it to go to the next polling review, but I would at least like it considered.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Bowes. I'm sorry, Provost, I think Councillor Spears had a question.
Yes, Councillor Spears.
Postal votes are great, but they've got to then write in or phone in to get them, and then they've got to post them. And it'd be interesting to know how many people apply for a postal vote and how many postal votes are actually received.
I think the turnout figures for people who are entitled to vote by post are high. So when people have gone to the trouble of registering for a postal vote, it's sent to their home, they can fill it in at home. It's then just a question of posting it into a post box, and the turnout is generally, I think above 80% for postal votes, which compares positively to turnout in polling places. So if I could move on then, Provost, to Ward 5, which is Bonnybridge and Larbert. It's just a single polling place change. The same considerations apply.
Okay, thank you. Bill Buchanan, any comment?
I'm quite happy with the things as they stand. In relation to using schools, I know that looking at some of the comments, somebody says it's outdated, incredibly outdated, but I'm quite happy that the schools would use, because schools are prominent locations within communities, and as our officer has says, Dale, the fact is that we don't need any risk assessments. We don't need to put porta cabins in the middle of some car park, and then we've got to have people there and doing risk assessments. I'm quite happy to utilise the schools. It's historical, and I think it's a part and parcel of the process of voting. And as somebody already says, how many times did we go to the vote? Minimal. So I'm happy. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Redmond?
Thanks. Yeah, quite happy. Everything looks fine. We use the schools, it's not much an issue. One wee minor thing I would pick up in is the map that we've got for it. A couple of our polling places are in Caskinare and Trice, like the Dolby Hall and Kinnaird Primary School. So maybe on the map it might be good to, because in the map they're the same colour, they're not bright like the polling. So that's a minor wee thing, but could they be bright as well, so that we know that they're the polling station for that area of the ward, even though they're in another ward, as Councillor Bowes will remind me.
Thank you. If I can come back through you, Provost, just to come back to that particular point, we did try to do that, but the setting for the maps had to be on a ward by ward or polling district basis, but we were struggling to manage to combine the two, so we've just had to keep them sort of they're duller looking. I appreciate that, but we'll try and correct that for next time round as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Deacon?
I've got no real concerns either. I just want to know, if the CAT doesn't go ahead, why hasn't St Joseph's been looked at? Because that could be a potential venue and it's got good accessibility as well.
Okay, Dale.
Thank you. Pardon my ignorance. Is St Joseph's a church or a school? Sorry.
It's both, but St Joseph's Primary School. It's virtually just next to Antonine. But I'm worried about the numbers going through Antonine Main Hall. Okay. So even moving the current one to Antonine, if a CAT doesn't happen, the community centre, moving that to St Joseph's Primary.
We have possibly considered it in the past. I'm not 100% sure, but it would certainly be able to be considered again in the future. But again, that kind of feedback would be really helpful for us to have been advised before now. What we can do, though, and what I will be doing, is keeping the feedback we're getting now and carrying that forward to the next review as well. So that would become one of the first places we'll be looking at if there's an alternative needed in the meantime. But if it needed to be pursued just now, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Newt?
So I think in conclusion, Provost, that the proposals are agreed subject to the consideration of St Joseph's in a future polling place review. So,
Provost, could I just say at this stage that did they mention the community centre, which is the hub of Bonnybridge and has been utilised for voting since it was opened. And I think the decision taken by members today and the work that's going to be involved through the LP officers is that there will be no need for another polling season because Bonnybridge Community Centre is going to be there forever.
Well said.
If I can move on to Falkirk North, Provost, there are a series of changes here in relation to polling places. Again, the same considerations apply, and there is also an amalgamation of polling districts as well. So I'll again open up for any comments.
It's my ward. I don't have any particular issues at all. Mr. John.
Just a comment that I'm pleased that we've been able to secure from Liddell, being able to have the poster cabins again, or the for voting in that particular area, as it's a low voting area and it has improved over the years with the addition of that mobile unit. Also moving from the Camelon Education Centre or the community to use the sensory centre, I think will be more accessible, as I'm aware there's been a number of safety concerns over that particular access in the past. But I think there will need to be a wee bit of education to voters for that area to ensure that they're aware of that change, and how to be able to access the sensory centre and fully understand the reasons for the amalgamations, etc. Most others are subject to a CAT transfer and have an alternative which are common sense and close to the areas, but other than that I'm content.
Thanks very much. Councillor Sinclair?
Yeah, just echo those comments and those of yourself, Provost. I don't really have any issue. And like Councillor Meikle-John there, I'm pleased to see that the mobile units will be retained, because I think that's it. And key to that is obviously communication and how we communicate that out to the electorate, because there is nothing more precious than democracy. So hopefully we can get that out and people will be able to vote as they should be able to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bundy?
Happy with the recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost. I think these are broadly agreed then, subject to the comments in relation just to some further voter information being available. We turn now to Falkirk South, where there are no proposed changes. So I assume we can skip over this one into
I know there's no change. I'm happy about that. Dale was just mentioning, like, some people had concerns with school. I do want to mention, I did observe at the last election, the school has an in and has an out, in the sense that when there's a pandemic, it was really good. People wasn't coming down the same way, whereas in Hogland Sports Centre, they were coming out the same entrance. You know what I mean? So I was really pleased about that. So it was just to mention that for health and safety. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a helpful comment from Councillor Binney. And we'll move on now to Ward 8, the Lower Braes, where it's a complex series of changes. So there are a number of polling places proposed to change, and there are also proposed amalgamations as well of polling districts. So again, to return to local members' comments.
Okay, Councillor Hahn?
Thank you, Provost. I think I should first of all apologise for not having responded to the consultation earlier. Ewan McWilliams did try to get me to do so, but there were reasons that I had problems at that particular time. So I do apologise, Dale, that you didn't get any of my comments before. The one thing I would say about mobile polling station, because I have voted in a mobile polling station before, and the only thing that I think deserves to say, yes, there's an issue about accessibility for the voters, but it's also in winter there are issues about the staff. It's one thing if you're just going in and straight back out after you've voted. It's another if you're sitting there all day. So I do understand that that is a concern and should be taken into account. In terms of the changes, given that I didn't comment when I could have done, I think it would be churlish of me to now come in and make too many comments. I think in terms of the issue about the Grange, I'm going to be going there later on today and I'll see what I can do about that one. The Green Park Community Centre, I'm hoping will be a community asset transfer, will still be there. So I think we'll take it as read that we'll be doing our best to make sure those things happen. In terms of the Grange, though, I think it probably would be preferable that it is a mobile unit rather than taking it to West Quarter, in that West Quarter's quite a distance away, and a mobile unit in Tesco Car Park is at least very close to where the Grange Community Centre is, would be my suggestion, but I'm not in any way wanting to hold this up for that purpose.
Okay, Bailey,
thanks, convener. I think Provost. I'm agreeing with Councillor Hannah. I've not heard from Councillor Forrest, but just ask Dale, with regards to Lawson Primary School and St Margaret's Primary School, there are an increase on both schools, and one is from a different ward. Have they got the capacity to take these?
To deal for that?
Thank you, Provost. Yes, we have checked capacity through place services for all schools. Anywhere that we're looking to work with properties within the council's portfolio, we've checked the capacity. So yes, it should be fine. Lauriston Primary School has been proposed in the past for a shared polling place for the polling district currently going to Lauriston Community Hall, and it would just be a case of using the school hall there, which is what's currently used, and there is plenty of space there.
Okay. Like other members who have spoke, Provost, hopeful that the community halls have put in cat transfers, we will still be able to use them. But just one deal for the community hall for, so on page 415, there's always an option for Lauriston Old Age Pensioners Hall on the main street, Mary Street. If we're looking for another option. And I see that the one at Pullman Sports Centre, St Margaret's, is very close, but has already been stated, the library's there as well, if required. But apart from that, just options. Apart from that, if that's the way we go, that's the way we go.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thanks for Councillor Forrest.
Provost, I'm not sure if anybody's speaking at the moment, but I can't hear anything.
Oh, Councillor Forrest was speaking, but that's a bit. Can you hear him now?
It's not very loud. Not very loud.
Right, okay, we'll try another one.
It's through use, isn't it? Thank you.
Is that better?
That's better now, Provost.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm getting a wee bit of feedback here. I've never used a mobile polling station before. I've never seen one. I'm one of the lucky ones, I think. From what I hear, it's just a porta cabin, and I would worry about the staff's well-being being in something like that. But other than that, I'm not criticising this at all. I'm not making a suggestion other than pointing out that Pullman Sports Centre, Madison and Green Park all get transferred to St Margaret's Primary, which would then have a total of 8 polling stations. Given the car parking space, you're not going to manage that. It would be far better to use a polling or several polling stations within the grounds of the Green Park if worst case scenario comes up and all these other places close. That's my only suggestion. It's 8 polling stations in one polling. Hang on, a polling place just seems a bit over the top.
Thanks, Councillor Forrest. I've got this done with you now.
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's any comment to make just in relation to the capacity of St Margaret's to deal with the proposals in the event that all of them were required, noting that some of them have CAT transfers.
I think, if I remember correctly, the maximum number of electors allocated there would be around 5,000, which would be, we would adjust the number of polling stations. We wouldn't be bringing in the number of polling stations as they currently stand, because you'll have some of a smaller number being smaller places, you'll have some that are a larger number, depending where they are, and of the breakdown of the polling districts and the allocation of voters to each polling station. So they would work, we work between 800 and 1,000 electors to each polling station. So that would give us about 5, but it would also, you need to remember that we don't have 100% turnout, sadly, at any election, and the number that we allocate includes people who will then become postal voters, so the number reduces for a variety of reasons, good as well as not so good. So the reality isn't anywhere near the number of people allocated to the polling place, but yes, we've recognised from the outset that it is a larger number than we would choose to have, but in the absence of any alternatives, but hopefully we won't reach that stage, depending on the SPR outcomes.
Thank you, convener. As I said, worst case scenario, I'm hoping that most of these places go over to community asset transfers. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Provost. And I think then, subject to those comments being carried forward into any future review, those proposals are agreed. We move then to Upper Braes, where there is a proposed amalgamation, plus again a series of proposed new polling places. So the same considerations apply.
Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I too, like Councillor Sinclair pointed out, I also find democracy precious. So glad we're able to have this conversation today. I was fortunate enough I was able to go along to the information sessions, and we've had pre-discussions about this. So further to what I've already discussed with officers, I think the only thing that jumps out obviously is that the California Community Hall has obviously since closed, but I think that it's suitable suggestion that it would just move to the California Primary School. There's really not much in that. It's obviously unfortunate the hall's closed, but it is a suitable replacement, so no real further comment on that.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll go to Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Provost. The only other concern that I have is the change from Madison Community Centre to St Margaret's Primary School. The walk itself is 2 miles. It's predicted a 40-minute walk, so it's quite a distance to cover for such a change. So I'm not sure if we could possibly look at the Methodist Church up on California Road or a mobile unit as an alternative.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moody.
Neil, I'm afraid I have to turn to you in the detail of that. I'm not familiar enough with the premises.
Could I have that? Could I have Councillor Brown to repeat that? Sorry, I didn't pick up all the detail.
Yeah, so you've got if Madison Community Centre was to close, the proposal is to move it to St Margaret's Primary School, which is a 2-mile walk.
No, if Madison Community Centre closes, it's Madison Primary School that we're proposing for Ward 9.
Have I got picked it up wrong?
There's a very small number of Ward 8 electors at Madison Primary School who would be reallocated because of the new boundaries. They would no longer be at Madison. They could now vote in Ward 8, which would be why I think that's the one you're maybe thinking of, which they would then go to St Margaret's. But the actual polling place for alternative for Madison Community Centre would be Madison Primary School.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, thanks.
Okay, I think subject to that clarification from Dale, which was helpful, those ones are now agreed. So I think overall then, Provost, the proposals are agreed subject to 2 which are away for further investigation, and those are the proposed replacement for the Bowness Recreation Centre and the proposed replacement for the Dalgarine Community Hall, and there'll be further information brought back on those.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, that concludes the business over 2 days of the council meeting. So thanks very much for your contributions and your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost.
Thank you.
Thanks, Provost.
Thanks.